Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I am your host here on RoxomTV every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Got a great show ahead of us today. We're going to be starting off with another Bitcoin policy hour to give you the scuttlebutt on everything that is happening related to Bitcoin and, unfortunately, crypto in Washington, D.C., direct from folks that are wading through the swamp and doing the Lord's work every single day, or should I say Satoshi's work. We're going to talk to a couple folks from the Roxom team as well, Azul and Anastasia in the second hour, and the third hour is just going to be me ranting with you. What a day we have for you guys. As I'm recording this right now, streaming this to you guys live from Roxom TV, the price of Bitcoin is $67,190 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. What a deal. Bitcoin is on sale. Let's go ahead and bring up our first guest here, Zach Cohen from the Bitcoin Policy Institute, now a regular staple here on this Tuesday program. Zach, how you doing, man? How's the swamp treating you? All right. I'd love to hear it. Yeah, it's always interesting. Anytime there's a federal holiday, it's just kind of a reminder, Bitcoin is always on nonstop, no matter whether you want it to be or not. And meanwhile, the rest of things just seem to sort of shut down. It's a great reminder. Every time I need to use the fiat banking system, I'm just reminded of how inconvenient it all is. And like, oh, it's after 5 p.m., so you can't process a wire transfer. It seems so ridiculous at the end of the day. But I guess it's just we've gotten too used to it, Zach.
We have, and it's a good reminder of why we do Bitcoin and why Bitcoin is money for everyone, all around the world, and not just financial markets here in the United States.
Yeah, and I think that gets so much focus because obviously Bitcoin ownership and just, I guess, general development, a lot of it is concentrated here in the USA, but Bitcoin is a global asset, right? It's a global network. And I think that people often forget that, especially around sort of the medium of exchange versus store of value side of this thing. We talk about it from primarily a store of value perspective here in the United States because, the dollar works reasonably well as a medium of exchange. Not so good as a store of value, but around the world, especially in the global South, it's like Bitcoin solves a very acute problem for them. And I think that's often lost. I'm curious too, before we kind of get into some of this, do you hear any talk of that? I mean, I went to the Bitcoin Policy Summit last year. You guys had human rights leaders from around the world and HRF representatives, Human Rights Foundation representatives there. Alex Gladstein was there, gave a great talk. A bunch of different opposition leaders and activists from around the world talking about sort of the medium of exchange, the uncensorable, unconfiscatable, borderless nature of Bitcoin, and talking directly to policymakers. Is that something that resonates with, let's say, the average politician in DC? Or does some of that sort of fall on deaf ears and they're not so concerned about that? They're more concerned with, hey, that's not a problem for us in America. Let's focus on what matters here in America. What's your take on that?
It's a good question. I think, look, the people who are probably most sort of prepared to receive a message like that are the folks who are doing kind of the diplomacy and international affairs efforts. And one of the major tenets of American foreign policy since, however far back, probably World War II, has been to export sort of like American ideals, right? Freedom, open networks, right? Like these are all the things that are sort of baked into the American project. And since World War II and maybe more sort of the Cold War period, trying to basically export through this like kind of soft power approach are sort of standard ideal American ideals, right? And Bitcoin is just sort of the greatest manifestation of that maybe we've ever seen in terms of a technology, right? I think there's definitely good arguments to be made about other technologies, but from an openness, kind of permissionlessness, freedom perspective, Bitcoin really is the classic kind of American technology. It really checks all the boxes. And so when we talk to folks at the State Department, for example, who are every day they're sort of working with folks around the world trying to put forth America's sort of international affairs agenda or policy agenda. Bitcoin is a great tool for them, especially for sort of combating a lot of our adversaries who they thrive on these closed networks, right? We look at China and their kind of CBDC that they're exporting to Southeast Asia and Africa. Those are closed networks. Those are closed systems. Those are very, very much kind of in line with the more of the Chinese project and not at all with the American project. And so as we're talking to folks, especially folks who are concerned about exporting sort of these soft power American ideals, Bitcoin is just the perfect tool for them. And they are coming around to that for sure. And I think, folks like Alex Gladstein and the Human Rights Foundation and all of the activists who are talking about how they're using Bitcoin, those folks are really kind of winning the battle from what we can tell. There's definitely other sort of vectors to convincing policymakers in DC that Bitcoin is good for America. But this is one that I think has really gotten strong traction.
I mean, I love hearing that. And maybe another follow-up question before we move on to some of our more scheduled topics is just, in your personal experience, what do you think has been the most, I mean, is this what we're describing right now, kind of the propagation of American ideals to the rest of the world? Is that what you think has been one of the strongest, let's say, like aha moments when you finally get a politician or a staff or a policymaker to sort of get it, to really grok why Bitcoin matters? Or is it something else? Is it something closer to home? Is it debasement, protection for citizens against debasement of the dollar? Is it protection against debanking? What have you found is sort of the strongest, let's say, argument on your behalf that serves as a catalyst for a policymaker to really start to have the wheels turning and kind of change their mindset on Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I've definitely gotten this question before. And I think the question I got before was like, what's your 60-second kind of elevator pitch for Bitcoin when you're talking to folks in Washington, D.C.? And I said, well, that's a good question, but I don't think there's sort of one pitch that works across the board, right? One of the key things, and this is true of any kind of relationship-based, trade, right? Like if you're a salesperson, you're not going to give the same product pitch to every single person. It's the same thing with us in Washington, D.C. It's, hey, there's so many different components of Bitcoin. What's going to land with these different offices? So the reason I kind of caveated my previous example and said, well, hey, this works really well with folks who are concerned about exporting American sort of values abroad, is that this works perfectly for them. And that's the first thing we're going to go to when we're talking with, the State Department, for example. For folks, maybe on the like Trump aligned side of the aisle, particularly in Congress, they're very much kind of aligned with the innovation and, technology perspective of Bitcoin, which is to say, we found great sort of product market fit as a store value asset. The market has really, borne that out. We're, somewhere between like 1.3 trillion and 1.5 trillion, peaking at over 2 trillion, on a market cap basis. It's pretty hard to deny that, there isn't demand for Bitcoin as a store value asset, right? And that's generally aligned with folks in, so-called like the right. Obviously, it's not kind of a perfect rule here, but in broad strokes, that's kind of the situation. And then with folks on the left side of the aisle, there's maybe a little bit more variance. I think there's also more variance in the kind of level of skepticism that we get. But for a lot of people, financial inclusion is a really strong narrative. Folks who have been debanked or underbanked, basically saying like, look, you don't even need an email address to set up a Bitcoin wallet, and you can send and receive transactions with nobody's permission. That's a pretty strong narrative. And of course, they're the national security inclined people who say, well, hey, that's a big privacy concern, or that's a big crime concern. There's like a little bit of inconsistency maybe that we see on a regular basis, but yeah, it really depends on who you're talking to, and that's why the meetings on the Hill are so fun, because you walk into an office and kind of what their pet issues are. Like some offices are very kind of foreign policy aligned. Some offices are more kind of, like Appalachia, like, or white community inclined, and they're looking for issues that resonate with their particular set of constituents. And so we go into those offices and we have a different story each time, and they're all true because there's so many facets to Bitcoin, right? There's so many reasons that Bitcoin is attractive to people. And it's really just a matter of kind of aligning with where people are, right? Kind of meeting them where they're at.
It's a great point. This is something I talk about ad nauseum, is that idea of meeting people where they are, not where you want them to be. And that's sort of
Right.
the beautiful thing about talking with anyone about Bitcoin. And I think everybody's had this personal experience when trying to orange pill a friend or a family member, trying to get them to see what you see. And
Yeah.
if you just tell it to them from, what has made sense to you, what made it click for you, that's generally not going to be what makes it click for them. It's something different. You have to find what's that trigger for them, that pain point for them, that point that they really, really care about, and how does Bitcoin fit into that? And the amazing thing is that Bitcoin's sort of this mirror. That's why it's really powerful, because you can be a, quote, progressive or a quote, conservative. You will find progressive things in Bitcoin. It is fundamentally progressive. We are progressing away from what is the old methods of money, but it's
Yeah.
also fundamentally conservative. It's a finite supply, sound money. So it's really a beautiful thing that you have this this incredible invention, discovery, whatever, that you can really use to appeal to a wide swath of people. And you would hope that it would, Zach. This is one of the things I appreciate about the work you guys are doing, is Bitcoin's not a partisan issue. It's a political issue. Money is
Yeah.
always political with a capital P, but it's not partisan. It shouldn't be. But I think, that's you guys have a tough battle there to try and really reinforce that. But you're doing great work over there, and I know we all really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's fun work, it's hard work, but I'll quote our government affairs director Ken Egan here, and someone's gonna have to send him this clip. But he says, it makes our job easy because we're selling a good product, and that's the truth, right? We were kind of doing an analysis of where BPI has gotten to in our very short lifespan. I think we're maybe 4 years old, maybe 3.5 years old at this point, and one of the most successful kind of policy shops on the think tank side of things, maybe that DC has ever seen. And of course, we have the Bitcoin superpower, the Peter McCormick cheat code. But we're also just selling, a good product, and people in DC are getting that. People in the Bitcoin community see kind of the work that we're doing, and have been very supportive. And so, yeah, I think Ken's right. Like we've got a good product to sell, and that makes our jobs easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot easier than trying to sell people on shitcoins. It's a lot more
Yeah,
moral
exactly.
as well. And speaking of shitcoins, not specifically shitcoins, but more generally, I do want to talk a little bit about the market structure bill. We talked about this last week in the show. I'm sure we'll have more updates on this in the future. Right now, it's a little bit in kind of stasis, flying in limbo a little bit, but I do think it's really useful for people to perhaps get an update on just what is the current status, maybe kind of, okay, here's what the bill does, here's where we're at right now, here's the concerning points from the Bitcoiner-minded perspective, what BPI has really been pushing on hard, and what may be sort of at risk right now.
Yeah, so I'll keep this somewhat brief, but for folks who haven't kind of gotten caught up on this, so the market structure legislation is kind of broadly speaking one of the large, larger digital asset industry initiatives in Congress this session. So the first one in line was the Genius Act. That was the stablecoin bill that was signed by President Trump this past summer. That's still being implemented. That's a separate issue. The second one in line is the Clarity Act, which is the larger kind of crypto or digital assets market structure bill. And in broad terms, that's sort of setting the rules of the road, per se, to use the jargon of the digital asset policy folks, the rules of the road for our industry, including, broader kind of digital assets and stablecoins to some extent as well, despite the Genius Act. And so this particular piece of legislation was passed through the House of Representatives. I think in like maybe September is when it arrived at the Senate. So, basically had to get through the House, now it has to go through the Senate, and then eventually will go to President Trump's desk for a signature, but has gotten stalled, needless to say, in the Senate. And so there was a little bit of a flurry in early January. We had the Senate Banking Committee do a markup, which basically means like a committee agreed upon bill that they would then go and vote on, and if passed through the committee, would go to the floor to be debated and then eventually voted on. That got stalled upon a comment from Coinbase that basically the language around the stable coins and the yield that they could offer through partnerships with, say, a Tether or a Circle was not included in that, basically, prohibiting them from offering yield on stablecoins held within their exchange. And then about a week later, we had the Senate Agriculture Committee, which is mostly in charge of kind of CFTC, which is the commodities regulator in terms of their jurisdiction. And so that particular markup within that committee was passed and went to the floor. And so we're just kind of waiting on what's going to happen with the banking committee. And it's been a couple weeks now. Haven't really heard anything. Ken Egan, our government affairs director, is a little bit more plugged in than I am, but if I haven't heard anything from him, it's probably a good indicator that not much has happened since then.
And maybe can you talk a little bit about the developer protection side of things? Because that's the one that I think, we've talked about this before. We've a lot of Bitcoiners been beating the drum on this. Sort of started out as this BRCA standalone blockchain regulatory certainty act or clarity act, and then that was lumped in with this market structure bill. But can you talk a little bit about what the goal of that part of the bill is, and sort of where that part stands? Because as I understand, that's a little bit on shaky ground, even relative to the rest of this market structure bill.
Yeah, great question. So the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act was introduced by two members of the House of Representatives. It was Richie Torres, who's a Democrat out of the Bronx, and then Majority Whip Tom Emmer, so obviously a senior ranking House member. And basically the bill itself, it wouldn't have much legs. Obviously not much legislation actually gets passed through our legislature. And so it got lumped in with the Clarity Act, which is, again, that market structure bill. And this bill is really kind of crucial. This is BPI's top priority in the piece of legislation. Bitcoin is pretty clearly a commodity. We've known that for a while. And so our main kind of dog in this fight, per se, is the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act provisions. And the origin of that bill was pretty plainly and simply the prosecutions of the Tornado Cash developers and the Samurai Wallet developers, Bill and Keone, who are obviously now in federal prison, which it was just a horrendous situation. And obviously we would have liked to have avoided that. And the intent of this particular bill or these provisions that have made it into the market structure legislation is to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. The Trump administration has committed to not basically prosecuting any more software developers. They could have, theoretically stopped the prosecution, dropped the cases for Samurai Wallet and Tornado Cash. Not totally clear what the chain of command situation was. We've referred to the Southern District of New York as the Sovereign District of New York. And so even if, the Department of Justice as a whole was aligned with us, and we did get this document called the Blanche Memo, which basically said this pretty clearly: we're not going to prosecute developers, like Bill and Keone. That basically it didn't translate down to the Southern District of New York, and obviously now we're in a pretty horrendous situation. Do highly recommend. Side note: if you haven't yet, go sign that petition. I think it's billandkeone.com. Is that right, Walker?
Billandkeone.org.
.org. Okay.
KEONNE. And folks should absolutely go and sign that. And I appreciate BPI's advocacy on this, as I know a lot of folks do, most specifically Bill and Keone, I'm sure, because this is one of those crazy things where the Southern District of New York, we don't have the hours to get into that absurdity here, but as the Sovereign District of New York, there's a whole lot of seeming funny business that goes on over there. But I think ultimately this just comes down to the fact that, and it sort of ties into one of our stories later that we'll talk about, but the fact that if you want America to be the Bitcoin and quote crypto capital of the world, you can't be throwing open source developers who were not even violating the FinCEN rules that they were supposedly charged with. FinCEN said, nope, they're not an unlicensed money transmitter. They're fine in our book. They don't pass that test. But they still got charged, they still got prosecuted and persecuted, and are now in federal prison. And you can't be doing that to open source, non-custodial developers who aren't handling any money. And the huge hypocrisy to me, Zach, is that this is all happening at the same time as major banks are paying multi-million-dollar fines for their ties to Jeffrey Epstein for banking a known, child sex trafficker and a predator for years, even after the knowledge became public that he was in fact doing that. And so the hypocrisy to me just is overwhelming here. I would hope that maybe, you know, maybe with midterms coming up, maybe there's an opportunity for a pardon on the table. We know that pardons often get used as sort of political bargaining chips. You know, what's in it for me? It seems that very little in DC happens without something being in it for the big guy, as they say. But I mean, what have you heard any rumblings of that? Is that still something that's being talked about internally? Because to me, this is just such an important issue. And it really does just speak to the fact that, look, if we want to be the capital of the world for Bitcoin and crypto, we have to take care to make sure our developers are protected and can write open source code and continue innovating on American soil without the fear of being thrown in jail.
Yeah, you're spot on. Just to kind of quickly go back to the last one, and then I'll answer this question. So the idea of the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act is to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again, right? This would codify into law, separate from any administration, any DOJ, that we cannot prosecute Bitcoin developers or developers of any kind of tangential product to a blockchain or crypto at large. We cannot basically throw them in jail for operating what they're calling a unlicensed money transmission business, which say they either processed or facilitated the transmission of funds from one person to another. And so this is really key. There's maybe some, and I'll get into this, maybe something we can do to kind of unwind situation that already exists, but even bigger than that, we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's really kind of the key component here of these provisions within the Clarity Act, and why that bill needs to get over the finish line intact. On the Bill and Keone side of things, I think an important piece of context, and maybe you've brought this up already, Walker, in a past conversation, is Trump had sort of these lawfare attacks launched against him as well, right? He knows very well the way that our sort of judiciary can go after people, regardless of kind of the underlying guilt per se, right? If there's a prosecutor who says, I want to take this person down, at the behest of whoever, they have the tools to do that pretty effectively. And that's scary for anyone. And to see that kind of play out with the president of the United States is also, it's a good reality check. And so, yeah, the question then becomes like, will Trump be able to do anything, or will his staff choose to do anything about Bill and Keone and writing them a pardon, right? This underscores the importance of people signing that petition, right? Because when it comes to that decision, they're going to say, okay, hey, what are the numbers here? Are we going to win serious votes if we do this? Right? Because everything costs political capital. There's a cost to doing everything in DC, and you're right, Walker. If there's a very obvious payoff for them of, we had 100,000 people sign this petition, and those are, likely midterm voters, then there's a pretty significant incentive for them to come through and sign this pardon. And so, yeah, I want to double tap on that. billandkeone.org. Please go sign that if you haven't already. We just need to kind of continue putting the pressure on here, right? I think Trump and his administration are primed to do something like this. There's really no reason to think that they wouldn't, but it is going to be kind of an ongoing and continued effort. And just as much as we need folks to call their senator and say, hey, we want the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act to stay intact in the market structure legislation, also going out and signing that petition for Bill and Keone. These are all kind of really important things, and they add up, right? The individual effort, maybe sort of marginal in nature, but if we get 100,000 signatures on something like this, it makes it much easier for us to go and say, hey, you guys you would really be missing the boat on this one if you don't come through.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And thanks for highlighting the double tap on that. I'm looking right now at the petition at billandkeone.org, and it is at 15,122 signatures, which is honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed in Bitcoiners for this. We spend often so much time hyper-focused on price, hyper-focused on, what number go up. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a Trojan horse for freedom, right? And as Alex Gladstein says, it's, number go up is the Trojan horse for the freedom go up. but the people that are actively making that freedom go up are the people that are writing open source code. And I would hope that we could get some more signatures for two guys who have been fighting in those trenches for 10 years doing this. 10 years without any problems. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere come the problems. There's a lot of questions there that I think still remain unanswered. But yeah, billandkeone.org. If you're listening to this right now, if you haven't signed this petition, just take 2 seconds to go sign it. Doesn't cost you a thing. You can share it as well. That doesn't cost you a thing either. And yeah, one of the other ridiculous things about this, just if you're wondering why you can't donate to their families in Bitcoin, you can only donate in fiat, because they were barred from using any sort of Bitcoin or crypto assets as part of their basically plea deal that they took, which is just like, talk about salt in the wound, insult to injury there. But yeah, billandkeone.org for anyone who wants to go check that out and support those guys. Zach, we're going to cut to a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to talk to you about a recent bit of study that River put out regarding Bitcoin ownership and changes in it. We're also going to cover the Dutch House passing this 36% unrealized capital gains tax, and sort of what that tells us about the larger global environment and where people are going to be moving or not moving with their feet. Again, we're going to cut to a quick break here, and then we'll be right back in just a couple minutes here on RoxomTV with Zach Cohen from the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Stay tuned.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed. This sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising. The dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. The price of Bitcoin at the time of streaming this is 67,750 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. We're going to jump into our next story, then bring back Zach Cohen from the Bitcoin Policy Institute to give his take on it. Our next story is about the changes in Bitcoin ownership. Bitcoin exchange, I should say Bitcoin only exchange, also not shitcoin casino, River, put out a graph just earlier today about changing Bitcoin ownership across 2025. Where were people buying? Where were they selling? As you can see here in the graph, Bitcoin ownership changed massively in 2025. So according to this latest report from River, individuals still hold the majority of supply at 14.01 million BTC, about 66.7%. But that share declined significantly over the year. Individuals reduced holdings by roughly 696,000 BTC in 2025 alone. On the other side of that trade were institutions. Businesses added 489,000 BTC, funds and ETFs added 205,000 BTC, and governments 135,000 Bitcoin. Now, at the same time, about 1.61 million Bitcoin, 7.7%, is estimated lost. So that's 968,000 Bitcoin, 4.6%, is attributed to the Satoshi era mining, and only 1.04 million BTC, about 4.9%, remains to be mined. So this available float just keeps on shrinking. Now, 2025 wasn't retail driven. It was balance sheet driven. Bitcoin moved off individuals and onto corporate treasuries, ETFs, and even sovereign balance sheets. So this is a great reminder that while individuals are selling, institutions, funds, and governments have been buying. I personally think you should stop selling them your Bitcoin, but that's just me. Let's bring back Zach Cohen from BPI. Zach, I'd love your take on this. I saw this graph and I immediately just thought, my God, my fellow plebs, we are selling the institutions, the governments, the funds, we're selling them our scarce corn. Now, everybody's going to do what's right for them, right? I don't want to tell anyone what to do with their money. That's the whole point of Bitcoin, is that you can't tell people what to do with their money. But when you see this, what was your first reaction to seeing this? Were you surprised, or was it kind of like, well, that makes sense?
Yeah, look, I mean, we obviously saw kind of the paper Bitcoin summer this last year, and that was a fun time, and good memes came out of that, of course. But it did sort of describe reality, which was, we had these digital asset treasury companies, obviously Michael Saylor and Strategy, add a ton of Bitcoin in 2025, right? There's kind of no denying that. And, obviously up to debate kind of whether that was a good or bad thing for the price of Bitcoin, for Bitcoin as the network and the asset. But it was just sort of necessarily the case. And that was the kind of defining trend, I would say, of this latest bull run. I think it is concerning, right? I think you put your finger on it, Walker. It is concerning that people are selling their Bitcoin to companies. A lot of the Bitcoin ethos has always been, this is a grassroots movement. This is, kind of civil resistance to some extent, right? Of the people coming back and saying, hey, we want sound money. And at the same time, it's just natural that, self-interested or entity-interested companies and nation states are going to come in and say, hey, we want some of this too. And so, definitely natural. It doesn't kind of like raise any red flags per se, in the sense of this is just kind of, I would say, part of the normal, adoption cycle. And if I was sitting on, some Bitcoin that I bought at $5, would I rotate out? Maybe a little bit. And so, yeah, it's a tricky question, but also just kind of, to me, seems like a natural kind of market force here. I was reading something interesting, Walker, that came out of Pomp's, what was it? I can't remember what the name of his event was, but Bitcoin Investors. Yeah, right. And Robert Mitchnick, who's he's kind of the head honcho of BlackRock in terms of their digital assets side of things. He said this sort of over the past couple of weeks, as we've seen the price trending down, only about like 0.2% of the total assets of the IBIT, Bitcoin ETF have rotated out. Right? That's tiny. That's nothing. These are like the most kind of like diamond hand kind of holders of Bitcoin. Funny enough, in the ETF, and that makes sense, right? We think about who was demanding a product like IBIT or any of the Bitcoin ETFs. It was folks who were previously sidelined because of regulations, right? A pension fund that can't sort of hold spot Bitcoin like you and I can. Those sorts of consumers of these products, maybe consumers is the wrong word, but institutions who are holding these products, they're long-term holders. They're not kind of trading in and out like folks in Asia per se who are kind of like, hey, let me buy in on Friday and then dump out on Sunday, right? It's just a completely different marketplace. And so that was a really interesting statement. And it definitely indicates kind of the profile of people holding or institutions holding these ETFs. And that's bottom line, just like good for the price, right? If we have large amounts of capital basically stocked away in these vehicles, and they're not going to sell when Bitcoin's down 50%. That's sort of good from a price perspective. We can obviously debate kind of whether it's good at large, but from a price perspective, yeah, that's just sort of undeniable in my opinion. And then on the individual side of things, right, like it just becomes this tricky question, and I can't remember when it was, but it came out that basically Galaxy had helped one of their clients sell like 80,000 Bitcoin or something, right? And it was like, oh shoot, like this is kind of unwinding the market. And that's a tricky thing because there's just like nothing you can do about that. And like I said, we have kind of traders, right? And this is another thing that I think has been sort of characteristic, or maybe has come to our attention more so recently, is the extent to which there's a lot of trading of kind of spot Bitcoin happening. And there's just that's just part of it. And I think my broad take is, as we see the market cap trend up, and as we see more flows per se into ETFs, for example, that are really kind of strong holders, that these kind of manipulation games maybe trend downwards.
Yeah, it is a great reminder that when we see these sorts of metrics, you have to wonder how much is the individual pleb selling a few sats versus how much is some of these OG whales who, as you said, were sitting on a lot of Bitcoin that they acquired at a very low cost, and are just like the Galaxy whale was 80,000 Bitcoin, are just dumping some of that. And probably it's not all the Bitcoin that they have. I'd be very shocked if they get rid of all the Bitcoin they acquired, because obviously they've held it for this long, managed to do so. Like that in and of itself is an incredible feat. So they clearly have a pretty good understanding of Bitcoin, but who doesn't want, I guess, just a few $billion in cash?
Right.
I wouldn't mind that. I guess I would probably buy Bitcoin with it because I don't have 80,000 Bitcoin to sell. But that's a different story. But again, and on the institutional side, you've got folks. You had the sort of paper Bitcoin summer that was very much in vogue, right? For a while, all these treasury companies popping up. But throughout that has been strategy just continuing to accumulate more Bitcoin at just an incredible scale. And they just announced today they acquired an additional 2,486 Bitcoin for $168.4 million at $67,710 per Bitcoin. Saylor managed to actually buy below current market price, which is great. Obviously, people give him shit for that, but obviously, he's executing these trades in the week in advance. And as of today, or as of yesterday, I guess they hold 717,131 Bitcoin. They acquired it for $54.5 billion at an average cost of $76,027. It's just massive to think about these numbers. And I feel like right now there's a lot of folks dunking on Saylor because strategy's been obviously, not performing great, as Bitcoin has not been performing great. It's a higher volatility than Bitcoin, obviously, to the upside and the downside. But at the same time, I mean, I cannot help but think that everybody who trashed Saylor is gonna look really foolish in probably less than 5 years, but certainly in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, all of this is gonna seem so obvious. What's gonna be crazy, I think, to people in the future is that, wow, why wasn't anybody else doing this? How did nobody else fail or see the writing on the wall like Saylor did? And it's like, you're measuring your plans in weeks. You may look at this and say, well, Bitcoin's dead, strategy's dead, all this is, going to zero. If you can think longer than a week at a time, then it becomes pretty clear that this is there's a different story happening here. But I want to maybe jump over, speaking of stories, to our next one, because this sort of relates to the global battle that we have going for people and for their money and people's ability to vote with their feet. And what we just saw was that the Dutch House just passed a 36% tax on unrealized capital gains, and the story is just kind of wild. They're moving ahead with their overhaul of the Box 3 tax system. They're advancing legislation that would tax actual returns, including unrealized gains, at 36%. So that means investors could owe taxes on increases in the value of stocks, funds, real estate investments, and of course, Bitcoin and crypto, even if they never sell. The rollout is targeted for 2028 pending final approval. Now, the core concern here is liquidity, obviously. Taxing unrealized gains means individuals may owe taxes on paper profits without receiving any cash flow. That obviously forces selling to simply cover the tax bill. And in rising markets, this creates synchronized policy-driven sell pressure. In volatile or thin markets, that pressure can compound, pushing prices down further and creating a negative feedback loop. Balaji Srinivasan argued that the danger is broader than just Dutch investors. In his words, wealth taxes can trigger, quote, forced liquidation pressure, meaning it's not only risky to hold assets as a Dutch citizen, it may become risky to co-own assets heavily held by those subject to the tax. If a large portion of a cap table is concentrated in a jurisdiction imposing mark-to-market taxation, simultaneous selling to meet tax obligations can drag down the asset price for everyone. In extreme cases, he suggests prices could fall so far that liquidation proceeds don't even cover the taxes owed, creating systemic stress. And we've already seen warning signs elsewhere. Norway's tightening of their wealth-style taxation led to high-profile relocations and public debate over capital flight and revenue shortfalls. When capital is mobile, aggressive taxation can shrink the tax base instead of expanding it as they imagine it will. The Netherlands is now testing one of the most aggressive unrealized tax models in the developed world, and I think we can imagine that global capital will respond accordingly. Zach, I want to bring you back up here for this because to me, when I see this, it's just so absurd because again, you had that example in Norway. I forget the exact numbers, but they thought they were going to collect an additional, $151 million or something like that. They ended up losing, hundreds of millions in tax revenue. These things just don't work. They don't work. They don't even pass just basic logic on this. Like there's no, there's nothing to tax there. Their gain hasn't been realized. Is this just the grasp of governments who are trying to, or maybe are they doing this because they actually think it will work? Or are they just so misguided that they just believe that, hey, we'll just keep, we'll just tax these unrealized gains. The wealthy have plenty. We'll just keep taxing it. There's not going to be any negative externalities. What's your read on this?
It's a tricky question. It's hard to know exactly kind of what the motivation is for things like this. And, I've been keeping up with the California wealth tax, former California resident here who, basically became a refugee because of the policies that came out of there. And obviously, very grateful that we live in the United States where you can move from one state to another with no real kind of restrictions on that. But yeah, it's just hard to know like why a policy like that, is even sort of considered. And there's definitely a political angle and can talk more to the California side of things, but typically speaking, there's just another interest at play here, which is in California there was an organization that basically came out and was very critical of the billionaires and the tech elite, and they were able to get this ballot proposal through to essentially scare them away, right? And there are things that certainly could have been done by the sort of administration or legislature in California to kind of undo these worries that just wasn't. And maybe that's incompetence. Maybe there's a larger agenda there. But again, I think these things aren't typically kind of economically motivated, or at least if they are, yeah, there's serious kind of judgment issues or evidence issues that the folks who are proposing these things are considering. And that wasn't the case in California. And I haven't looked, in too much detail at what's going on here. But, it has become a sort of like classic policy issue, right? There was an interview with AOC, I guess maybe earlier this week or late last week, where she was kind of like boasting about, when she's president, about, kind of what this wealth tax is going to look like. And that's really scary. It's just plain scary. There's just like no way around that. And, that's why the work that we're doing at BPI is really important. I'm not going to come out here and say like, hey, we're going to win over the AOCs of the world, and we're going to, protect Americans from a wealth tax. That's going to be a much larger kind of initiative than something BPI could take on at this moment in time. But the bottom line, it's just scary. And, especially as a young person, kind of trying to grow up and build my own wealth and live a kind of prosperous life. To even like hear these things being said is, pretty disheartening.
Yeah, it's fundamentally just a broken incentive, right? It just doesn't make any sense. One would imagine, that their goal was to get all of the capital to flee, because that's what's going to happen. And the
Right.
purpose of a system is what it does. But perhaps they are just really that ignorant about how people act in the real world. I'm not sure, but it does bring us to one thing I want to discuss with you too before we get you out of here in a couple minutes, which is around on the U.S. tax side, the potential for a de minimis exemption for Bitcoin. But right now it looks like it's just for crypto, but actually it's maybe just for stable coins at this point, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Can you talk about the state of that right now? Because I know that's another thing you guys are really kind of pushing for at BPI, and also companies like Square have been actively pushing for as well.
Yeah. The most recent thing that I've seen on this, and then I'll circle back, was a tweet from Coinbase, actually, I think this morning, talking about the new 1099 DA standing for digital assets, basically talking about what Coinbase is required to file with the IRS, basically, about their customers, and even exchanges like River, right, will be required to comply with this new 1099 DA reporting requirements. But basically, that's how traditional exchanges like, Schwab or Fidelity have worked in the past, which is, we're going to report all of your cost basis for all the stock that you own. We're, in the case of the 1099 DA, there's additional reporting that, kind of goes along with maybe some concerns that we've seen about, blockchain surveillance, right, where the IRS can basically track, where the funds are going. It opens up a lot of really kind of scary and problematic things. And so there is legislation that's being developed right now. I don't think there's any kind of public drafts that have been circulated about a digital asset tax bill, but that will come out of the House Ways and Means Committee. We've got some folks that we're working with over there. And you're right, Walker. The first couple of drafts that were circulated, at least internally, focus completely on stablecoins, and this is the thought that I had about the Coinbase tweet this morning. Was they basically said, hey, look, as it stands, we have to report transaction fees, right? So like gas fees for people who are using, let's say like a stablecoin on Ethereum, for example, right? There are fees associated with that people will be paying taxes on. And so there's a little bit of an impetus, you might say, for someone who's holding a stable coin thinking, hey, I'm just using this as a dollar proxy. I'm not going to be paying tax on this because the dollar isn't changing at all. So, there's maybe a little bit of a reason there, but at the same time, like if people are going to be using Bitcoin for, buying a coffee, or whatever it may be, and Coinbase did acknowledge, that particular use case, in the tweet, that there should be, some limit, basically, right? However many hundreds of dollars a day, where you can spend your Bitcoin at a vendor, for example, buy a burger or coffee or whatever it may be, and not, have a tax liability. So early days on that, I don't think we're going to see anything moving on that, especially quickly. I think there's still a baseline education to be done, right? A lot of these staffers don't understand that when you use a stablecoin, for example, there are underlying kind of base networks like Ethereum, for example, where there are transactions that are being executed, right? Even Bitcoin, right? We're seeing an increasing use of stablecoins on Bitcoin. We're looking at, Elizabeth Stark with their work on Lightning and stablecoins on Lightning. And if it's the case that people are going to be using stablecoins on Lightning, there should be some kind of exemption for Bitcoin as well. So there's just a lot of kind of baseline education that needs to be done here. Just trying to kind of educate, because we are still at that very baseline level with a lot of these policies. But you're right. Like baseline, most importantly, we need to do education on like why doing a unrealized, tax, unrealized gain tax is just completely antithetical. It's un-American, and it's just bad on all counts. So there's levels to these things, but still kind of working it at all angles here.
I can't stop thinking about how terrifying a President AOC would be.
I know.
Oh my God, it's the stuff of nightmares, right? Well, Zach, now that you've left me with that, which will be a nightmare fodder for me, certainly for the next couple of days. Appreciate your time. I know we got to get you out of here. Where do you want to send folks? They can check out more about the work you guys do at BPI.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is btcpolicy.org. We're on Twitter, now X. I wonder when we're going to stop saying that, by the way. I don't know if you've transitioned over, Walker. Okay. At BTC or at Bitcoin Policy spelled out. I think my handle was on there somewhere. It's Zach, Z-A-C-K, Cohen, C-O-H-E-N _ You can find me there. But yeah, we're pretty active across those channels. So if you want to keep up with us, that's the best way to do it.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate all of the work that you guys do. We're going to be having you on here every other week on RoxomTV for a little Bitcoin policy updates. Everybody can stay in the know about everything that is happening or not happening or might happen in the swamp of Washington, D.C. Zach Cohen from the Bitcoin Policy Institute, thank you so much for joining, Zach. Looking forward to seeing you not next week, but the week after. And we'll keep on doing it. In the meantime, guys, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have Roxom's own Azul and Anastasia. We're going to be talking about a few more stories that we've got. We've got Steak and Shake. We've got this global asset registry. We've got Lawrence Lepard absolutely roasting a Bloomberg analyst for his idiotic take on Bitcoin, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We will be right back here in a moment on RoxomTV.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I'm here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are 1 hour into our 3-hour streaming marathon here on Roxom. The price of Bitcoin right now is $68,054 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. And we are going to get into our next story, which is a spicy one. before bringing in our next two guests, Roxom's own Anastasia and Azul. But I'm going to get into this story first to sort of set the stage before we bring them in. So you may have seen this because it has been making the rounds, but Larry Lepard just absolutely roasted a Bloomberg analyst. Now, in his recent interview with Bloomberg analyst Mike McGlone, Lawrence Lepard grilled him for saying Bitcoin is, quote, an asset that has unlimited supply. And that's when things went off the rails, got a bit heated, and you got to see some of that classic Larry Lepard fire. McGlone then doubled down. He implied Bitcoin, lumping Bitcoin into this larger crypto bubble, predicting a collapse to $10,000, claiming 2024 was, quote, as good as it gets, and arguing the whole space is just a high beta risk trade dependent on stock market liquidity. He compares the cycle to tulips. Wow, we've never heard that one before. Very high IQ move there. He says stablecoins like Tether are the real enduring trend and could eventually flip everything, maybe even Bitcoin. He says the mania is over. Flush it out. Wait for everything to go to zero. Let's go ahead and take a look.
If you weren't in it the best 20 days from 2018 to 2025, you missed 600% gains. I mean, so, my view is you buy it, you hold it, you dollar cost average.
So
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
You're dollar cost averaging in an asset that has unlimited supply. That's done. It's over. It's reached
whoa. Stop. Unlimited supply. What the fuck are you talking about?
We're going to go there. Okay, let's create some controversy here. The crypto bubble. Okay, so maybe you should let me speak before you interrupt, because you're described a classic bear market. You're denying it. You're trying to buy every dip. You'll sell out. You'll stop out when. And I'll state now, it reaches a pretty low plateau around 10,000. That's usually how markets work. But please understand what happened in 2024. That was as good as it gets. Mr. Trump flipping. Now, if you're investing in the space, not only are you're supporting the Trump administration, you're dependent on the Trump administration. You have stable coins that have taken over the peer-to-peer cash. If the trade is done, and you still have millions of cryptos worth billions of dollars. Let's flush those out. Let's get Shiba Inu down to zero, Dogecoin down to zero, and then restart. In the meantime, if you're long any of these highly volatile risk assets completely dependent on beta, you have to have the stock market go up. It's flunked two tests. It's failing versus beta. It's failed versus gold. The whole space is done. Just get out. Wait till you see a lot of stuff goes to zero and then get back in. But the biggest trade in history, the bubble is bursting. I will make the prediction from the future. We will look back at the crypto mania very comparable to tulips. It's just getting started. Like I said, now, if you're buying Bitcoin now, you better hope that 180-day volatility in the stock market stays an 8-year low. You better hope that market cap to GDP stays at a 100-year high. Just acknowledge the trade and trade. Sell rallies and risk assets.
I hope somebody's got a video of this, because we're going to shove this up your ass in a year or two.
Gosh, I absolutely love it. There is just so much wrong here with what Mike said. He clearly has no idea about Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not have an unlimited supply. That's kind of the whole thing. It has a mathematically enforced 21 million Bitcoin cap. And conflating Bitcoin with the thousands or tens of thousands of vaporware altcoins, shitcoins, is either lazy analysis or just willful ignorance, maybe a little bit of both. Other guests in the interview agreed that most crypto likely goes to zero, crypto that is, but Bitcoin is different. It is digital scarcity. It's a binary adoption curve. It either fails completely or becomes a global store of value. That is the trade. It is a 0 to 1. And honestly, this is a great opportunity for us to say what needs to be said. Bitcoiners need to be more toxic when these narratives show up on major platforms. Bad framing spreads fast. If you let unlimited supply slide unchallenged on Bloomberg, that misinformation calcifies. We need more people like Larry willing to call it out in real time and absolutely destroy these BS narratives before they metastasize. I want to go ahead and bring up Anastasia and Azul. They're both of RoxomTV here. Make sure to give them both a follow. Ladies, how are you doing here?
Great. Thanks for having us, Walker.
Yeah, all good on our end.
Okay, so I've watched this video now several times over because I love Larry. I love Larry because he is a boomer who groks Bitcoin to an incredibly high level. He wrote the book, The Big Print. It's fantastic. I may or may not have narrated the audiobooks. I'm a little bit biased, but it is fantastic. The book aside, I'm not even speaking the audiobook. But when I saw this clip, when I saw Mike, I was watching it before I knew what the clip was about. I saw this Mike guy from Bloomberg. Again, this is Bloomberg, right? They're supposed to be the creme de la creme, the top of the financial analysts. And he starts saying this stuff about unlimited supply. And in the moment where I was just thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? Larry literally took the words out of my mouth, said, what the fuck are you talking about, man? This makes absolutely no sense. I mean, Anna, I'd love to get your opinion on this, because I see this coming out as just like, how is it possible that we're still getting these narratives about unlimited supply, tulips, all of this? It's just like, it just feels like Groundhog Day. How is it that somebody at Bloomberg is so just either uneducated or purposefully spreading FUD? What was your read on this when you watched the video?
I couldn't believe it. Like you said, how is this still a conversation after all these years, right? This guy must live under a rock, I swear. And by the way, how does he hold a title analyst, like Bloomberg analyst? What kind of analysis is he even doing, right? I mean, you just did a story about River earlier, and 14 billion trillion, BlackRock has 14 trillion assets under management, and they're buying so much Bitcoin. Sovereign nations are buying Bitcoin. Companies, public companies are buying Bitcoin. For him to just come out with this narratives, I'm shocked. Honestly, I'm shocked. I think he should be fired from his job.
Yeah, and as well, I'd love your opinion on this, because I know you come from also kind of a traditional journalist background. I mean, when you see this sort of just like, I mean, I don't know if it's gross negligence, willful ignorance, if it's purposely just spreading misinformation, but when you see this, like, as somebody who comes from that journalist background, what's your first thought on this? I mean, do you think that this guy, was your read on him that he just doesn't know what he's talking about, or is he trying to just kind of muddy the waters, trying to push his own narrative? What was your read on this?
More than a read, I had a question, which is like, he's obviously, I mean, if he's a Bloomberg analyst, he's obviously well read on the subject. I don't think he's, dumb enough to think that Bitcoin is actually unlimited. I just feel like it's easier to quiet down, this movement or this perspective or this future that maybe you don't feel you are as well versed in as you might be in, fiat and the Fed and whatever. So I think it's more of a way to silence it, because I'm a full normie. I know very little about Bitcoin, but even I know more than this guy said in that video.
It really is astonishing, because, and God bless Larry for this, because I think that, again, coming back to what was said in the initial story read through, was just that we need to call this stuff out. We cannot let this stuff slide. For so many years, the legacy media, I won't even call them mainstream anymore, but the legacy media narrative, because this, Roxom is new media, it's independent media, right? We've got lots of independent media organizations who actually endeavor to give people good information, to bring people the truth in a hopefully mostly unbiased way. You can never fully remove bias. Bias is in all of us, but we try to give both sides of things, right? But you see these legacy media organizations that just completely maligned Bitcoin for years. Whether it was Bitcoin is burning the planet and they're going by the Ripple research that was basically trying to FUD Bitcoin, whether it's Bitcoin is used by criminals, whether it's the 500 odd obituaries that have been published in mainstream media for Bitcoin. And that's not even to speak of all the obituaries Peter Schiff publishes every day. That's just too much at this point. But you see this, and it's very obvious why trust in these legacy media institutions has completely gone away. Why would you trust an institution that will just have its spokespeople lying to your face? So I say, I'd love your take on this again, Anastasia, but was Larry off base here? I think he was rock solid. I think we should be saying this more. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? The whole thing, we're going to shove this up your ass. It's like, this Mike guy seems to really put the anal in analyst, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'd love your take on it.
I love Larry. We really need more people like Larry. We need to be shining light on this completely outdated narrative. I mean, how many times are people going to bring up the tulip story? How many times will people just not check any sources whatsoever, especially someone like a Bloomberg analyst? I mean, you said it best. These legacy media platforms, they're just dying out. And with getting feedback from their, big head analysts that they have no idea what they're doing. How would anyone trust this guy ever? I mean, you really have to live under a rock not to know that this is all for false information. I actually, before the show, once I saw that video, I had to go and find my toxic Bitcoiner shirt. I have this shirt with Brittany.
Yes.
It's quite a famous one because I really just got fired up. And this is exactly why toxic Bitcoin, maximalism exists. I mean, it's not that we're toxic. Bitcoiners are not toxic. We're just freaking tired of all this BS, all these narratives that just been pushed down the public's throat. Like, I'm excited to hear what Azul thinks, but it's nice to have someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of background on Bitcoin to weigh in. It breaks my heart that there are still a lot of people that do not know much about Bitcoin, and they would tune in and actually kind of take what this Mike guy, I can't even remember his last name, and I don't want to remember his last name, what he has to say. It does break my heart that people would actually assume that he knows what he's talking about. But no, Larry, I salute him. There are no other words in this particular situation, but to just throw F-bombs and just, say it as it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Azul, I want to get your take on this too, because as you said, you're coming from, a quote normie perspective, right? You've now been sort of thrown in the deep end of the Bitcoiner world here at Roxom. And I'd love to just know, coming from that perspective, I mean, how much have you been exposed to the quote toxic, maximalism of Bitcoin? Is that something that, coming from your background, your perspective, that you viewed as sort of a negative? Should Bitcoiners be nicer? Should we let this stuff slide? Should we try to, engage in more polite ways? Or is this something where you say, yeah, that's a very appropriate response, regardless of whether you are deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole or not, because you should call out this kind of just misinformation where you see it?
I mean, it's making me think of something Simone de Beauvoir said regarding feminism. And it's like, you can't really achieve change by asking for permission. And from my perspective, I've never encountered toxic Bitcoin personality in the terms of like people being disrespectful. I have at times been overwhelmed by the idea of like buying Bitcoin, who Anna is helping me do for the first time. It is a good time for me to start right now. But I feel like you guys have a very specific aesthetic and a very specific, language. And the question that I ask myself, in regards to this Bloomberg journalist, but many other, mainstream media journalists, because I worked at those places, is we're not really asking the right questions, or rather, are we asking the right questions as journalists, right? We argue about Trump, we argue about Iran, but like Bitcoin tackles the actual system. All of this is built in. And why are we not giving that, more time in the spotlight? And why are we not teaching people like me about it earlier?
I think it's such a great point. And it's really one of the reasons that I think Larry's response to this is so warranted. And we need more of this kind of an attitude, because these legacy media journalists, like it or not for people, there are still so many individuals who look to them to get the news, right? Who look to them for what is the truth, what's happening. They will see somebody with the credentials that say Bloomberg and assume that person knows what they're talking about. Now, that's a bad assumption. Clearly, in the case of Mike McGlone, clearly he doesn't know what he's talking about, or again, he's being, willfully ignorant here. But it's really, it does a disservice to people who put their trust in you to give you, to give them your unbiased opinion, to give them the facts, when you just go out there and either spread information or willfully lie about stuff. And again, it's like legacy media is on the downturn, right? But it's nobody's fault but their own at the end of the day. They're the ones out here putting forward talking heads that are just spewing this bad information. And so, you wonder, it's like, oh, how did we get here? Why is trust in institutions failing? Well, because the institutions are lying to everybody, or they just don't know what they're talking about. And so I think that this is just a really perfect example of that breakdown. And you see somebody like Larry, he's been an investor for basically his whole career, and he may not be, the perfectly politically correct guy for, not as politically correct as this Bloomberg guy, but at least he tells the truth. At least he goes out there and says what people are thinking. At least he tries to educate people on this 0 to 1 moment that Bitcoin represents. And so I say hats off to Larry. We need more of this. We should all let Larry be your spirit animal, channel more of the Lawrence Lepard energy. I think we need it now more than ever. I could talk about this one all day because it's so dang hilarious and also sad on the part of the legacy media. But I do want to switch. We're going to switch gears just a little bit here, ladies. The next story we have is also quite a fascinating one. And I'm not sure if this is just another psyop or if there's something else here. I'm going to get your take on it after we run through the story. But former President Barack Obama stirred some fresh conversation about extraterrestrial life this weekend after a casual remark on a podcast went viral and sparked renewed interest in UFOs and scientific speculation more broadly. During a rapid-fire segment on the No Lie podcast with host Brian Tyler Cohen, Obama was asked, "Are aliens real?" And he replied, "They're real, but I haven't seen them," before joking that they are not being kept at Area 51 unless a conspiracy huge enough to hide them even from the U.S. president exists. The comment instantly drew online attention, reigniting debates about government transparency and unidentified flying phenomena. But by Sunday evening, Obama had posted clarification on Instagram intended to defuse misinterpretations. He explained that he was participating in a lighthearted segment and meant that statistically, given the vastness of the universe, life elsewhere is possible. However, he emphasized that there is no concrete evidence of extraterrestrial contact with Earth, and he saw no such evidence during his presidency. Wink, wink. The topic isn't new for Obama, though. In 2021, an appearance on The Late Late Show, he joked about one of the first things he asked, after assuming the office, was about alien life, only to be told there was no secret lab holding extraterrestrials. That blend of curiosity and skepticism reflects a broader shift in how the government views unidentified aerial phenomena. In recent years, the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence agencies have declassified more footage and reports of UAPs, objects that cannot yet be explained, without claiming they represent extraterrestrial visitation. The viral nature of the comments underscores a persistent cultural fascination with life beyond Earth, fueled by scientific advantage such as discoveries of potentially habitable exoplanets and a series of U.S. government disclosures acknowledging unexplained aerial sightings. But Obama's clarification aligns with the consensus among scientists and intelligence officials. The possibility of life elsewhere does not equate to proof of contact with Earth. Anastasia, Azul, I want to bring you both back up here again because I see this, and for one, if you listen to folks like Matthew Pines and you start going down this rabbit hole about these things, you get pretty darn convinced that not only have we had visitations, there may be a whole lot of other questions about, wow, maybe it's not just visiting, maybe they've actually just been here for a long time. There's a lot of questions that get raised. They've declassified a lot of these military footage, from fighter pilots showing all of these UAPs. Obama's comments seem kind of like one of those accidentally saying the quiet part or saying the truth out loud and then needing to walk it back and saying, no, this was just a lighthearted banter and you don't need to worry about me. I need to work on my Obama impersonation, by the way, so apologies for that. But what was your read on this as well when you saw this? I mean, there's a lot of controversy about this. This goes back to the age-old question of, are we alone in the universe? Do you think this was Obama actually kind of slipping up and telling the truth? Or do you think that it's, it was just exactly as he said, it's just a little lighthearted banter on a podcast and think no more of it?
I have to say that I've always been amazed by Americans and their conspiracy theories. Like you guys never reached the moon and, aliens and so many other things. I don't know if it's like a national thing, but I don't tend to, partake in those. But I do think, to be fair with you guys, every time, it's about to die down, something comes up that, gives it life again. I am very inclined to believe that he was being, he's not president anymore. He is a public figure, but he's speaking for himself. At the same time, I am very intrigued. I'm looking forward to seeing what people online are going to continue to be saying and how they're going to prove that he was actually giving us some insight into what, the US president knows about this topic.
Well, on the conspiracy theories front, I have to say, as an American, it was a crazy conspiracy that there was a massive child sex trafficking ring run by an elite pedophile cabal of, satanic politicians. And then that turned out to be true. it was a conspiracy theory that the COVID vaccines did not actually prevent COVID nor prevent transmission, and then that turned out to be true. Many things that are, quote, conspiracy theories turn out to just be news that hasn't actually been reported yet by the mainstream media. And as we did see just in our last story with Larry, the mainstream media is often hopelessly either in the dark on purpose or, accidentally. But Anastasia, I'd love to get your take on this. Where are you at with this? Is this Obama letting up a little slip of the tongue, perhaps being a little too loose? Or is he correct that he's never seen any evidence of this at all? We should believe all of the intelligence agencies. We should believe the Department of Defense, because I know if there's one thing that's true, it's that our government and their intelligence agencies would never lie to the American people. We know that to be true, right?
This one really gets my tinfoil hat on. I really do think that this was not some sort of, him in the spare of the moment. I think this was if I'm being honest, I think it feels like a plug-in, right? I mean, the mainstream media, the powerful few, they are losing the narrative. I mean, all of this Epstein files coming out, there's so much that's really is kind of being brought up to the surface that they're grabbing on to like the final little things that they can like put their claws in. Like we're seeing they're outlawing social media. Europe is like the first ones. Why are they doing that? Of course, yeah, we gotta keep our kids safe, but what do kids do when they go on TikTok? They speak their minds. They start to go down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories, like you pointed out, Walker, that all seem to be coming true. So what would this be? I don't think it's a kind of a random thing that Obama decided to plug in the aliens. There is a theory that the governments, they do have the technology for UFOs, and many actually people that worked for NASA. I think I'm blanking on the name of the gentleman, Walker. Maybe if you've been down that rabbit hole, you know the person I'm referring to, but. There is a theory that as the powerful few start losing power, they will resort to any, measures, including doing the fake out of aliens. Now, before you do the fake out, you have to start plugging them in the conversation. I don't know how weird and, far you want to go with this. I do believe that there are aliens. I also do very much believe they're higher beings and they cannot interfere in this human game of life. They cannot just show up and be like, hey, we got to fix stuff. Although if they really have to, they probably will. But before they show up and interfere in human, existence, I think some of these powerful agencies are going to fake out an alien invasion. I'm kind of fully into this whole idea. Like, why wouldn't they? You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't they want to scare a bunch of people away? And think about it. Like, there was I think it was last year, there was something happened in Miami. It was like big news, aliens in the mall. Like, it seems that there's like occasional plug-ins to distract the audience, but also to get you question these things. So yeah, that's my take on it. I know it's a little out there, but I'm standing firm by my beliefs.
I'm here for out there. I mean, this is a slight digression, but it is on the topic of aliens. I've recently been listening to the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, which is outstanding. It's a really great audiobook series, and it's sci-fi, and their general premise, without giving too much away, you'll find this out very quickly, but that Earth has basically been just one of many, a multitude of planets that have been seeded by sort of a primordial race, and then they're ultimately just meant to build up civilization to a certain point before we are farmed. I won't give away any more than that, but there's a lot of interesting theories out there on this. And I think when it comes to just UAPs more broadly, it's like the other explanation is that, okay, this is one of the big things you hear talked about is, well, this is just, military tech that's not on the books yet, or that's foreign military tech maybe, or any of these things. And that one, it's like, I have a little bit of a problem with, because if there was a foreign adversary that had basically figured out a way around physics as we understand it right now, I don't think the world would look as it does right now. Power dynamics would have shifted rapidly if this was something that could be deployed at any meaningful scale. And so it raises the question of, well, then what are these things? Are they just random hallucinations caught on camera? I don't know. But I think that we're going to find out a lot more in the years to come. And I think it is going to be interesting. It's always difficult to differentiate, what's the PSYOP from the truth? And is the PSYOP trying to actually tell you what the truth is, but then make that truth seem so ridiculous that you won't believe it when it actually comes to be, publicly known as true, and you still just think it's a PSYOP? There's layers of PSYOPs here that are very, very difficult to unpack, I think. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that, okay, you hear, whether it be Obama or any sort of politician talking about these things, and you have to wonder how much compartmentalization there is amidst these, intelligence agencies with the president. Does the president know everything? I mean, JFK didn't know that he was about to get assassinated. No, not by our own government, though, that's for sure. But clearly there are things that are kept from the president, and there is that larger sort of shadow government that is at play that goes, it doesn't just think in 4-year cycles, but thinks a lot longer. Now, Azul, I know this may just sound like American conspiracy, but again, today's conspiracy is tomorrow's news at 6. So it's always hard to know. We've got a couple of more stories here that I'm really excited to get into. Both the Global Asset Registry, some totalitarian temptation story there, Steak and Shake on a Bitcoin standard, and some more of the Epstein files, really proving that nobody is safe from being called out. Well, at least some people are, but we'll get to that later. We are going to take a very quick break first, and we're going to come back and hit these other stories here on RoxomTV. So stay tuned. We'll be right back in a moment. Maybe there'll be more alien talk. Who can say? But we'll be right back here on RoxomTV.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. I am Walker America. The price of Bitcoin is right now $67,798 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes, aka petrodollars per Bitcoin. We're going to jump right into our next story, which smacks of a bit of totalitarian temptation. So a viral clip of Erica C. Payne speaking at a World Bank Group / International Monetary Fund event is exploding online. And for many watching, it's not just controversial, it is quite chilling. Payne, the founder of Patriotic Millionaires and author of Tax the Rich! Has long argued that concentrated wealth threatens democracy. But in this clip, she goes much further. Quote, "We have to have a global asset registry. We have to know who has the freaking money," she says. If someone doesn't want the public to know how much they have, she claims, quote, "chances are they got it from somewhere they shouldn't have gotten it from," end quote. She then calls for a, quote, "an international conversation about what is enough," before declaring, "the only way to take away that power is by taking away the money. And the only way to take away the money is taxation. Forget progressivity. This is about taxation in order to preserve human freedom." Interesting. Let's hear it straight from her mouth, though, and roll the video.
We actually have a beautiful opportunity in front of us with the United States being such an unmitigated disaster as it currently is. Okay? So there is the opportunity, and within that opportunity, I would suggest three things. The first one, we have to have a global asset registry. We have to know who has the freaking money. And if they don't want you to know that they have the money or how much money they have, chances are they got it from somewhere they shouldn't have gotten it from, and they're spending it on something they shouldn't be spending it from. So number one, a global asset registry. Number two, we have to facilitate an international conversation about what is enough. And that if there is a number that is enough, there is a number that is too much. We believe that money becomes power, and when power threatens your democracy, you have to take away power, and the only way to take away that power is by taking away the money. And the only way to take away the money is taxation. So number three, forget progressivity. All right? Forget progressivity, unless by progressivity you mean taxation that makes people less rich. This is not about a 2% wealth tax when somebody's getting a higher return than that. This is about taxation in order to preserve human freedom.
Oh, dear Lord, I can't believe we're doing this again. Okay, we're going to go through the rest of the story, but I don't know how you can watch that and think that that person has what's in your best interest at heart. But let's be clear about what's being proposed here. We are talking about a centralized global system that tracks who owns what across borders, combined with taxation explicitly designed to make people less rich. It's not some modest reform, it's a coordinated global financial surveillance panopticon paired with engineered wealth reduction. History tells us exactly where this kind of thinking can lead. As Barney XBT reminded us on X, quote, "In 1933, the US government literally made it illegal to own gold, told citizens to turn it in at $20 an ounce or face fines and jail time, then revalued it to $35 an ounce, robbed you at gunpoint, and marked it up 75% the next day. They confiscated the hardest asset on the planet from their own citizens because the balance sheet was underwater. And somehow people still think keeping everything in a bank account under their name is safe," end quote. So this wasn't ancient history, right? This was less than 100 years ago, and it's one of the reasons why anytime anyone says FDR was a good president, I point to his forced confiscation of American citizens' gold, and his forced internment of Japanese Americans in internment camps, and say that guy was a bit of a piece of shit. But I digress. Bitcoin developer Peter Todd put it bluntly, quote, "Why wealth taxes and registries of all kinds are extremely dangerous. They force you to tell the government how much you have, making it far easier to arbitrarily seize. This isn't a debate about fairness, though. It's about power. A global asset registry hands unprecedented financial visibility to centralized authorities. Taxation explicitly designed to strip wealth becomes a political weapon. And, when leaders are openly arguing that freedom requires taking away your money, that's not protecting democracy. That's just sort of bastardizing it. And for millions turning to self-custodied Bitcoin, this is exactly the kind of future they are opting out of. I want to go ahead and bring in Anastasia and Azul here. This, to me, this is one of those things where I really just need that Larry Lepard clip. I need to have it on a button here so I can just press it. What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? Because this is just insane to me. And what is particularly insane is that this is just totalitarianism 101. What do communists, it doesn't matter what kind of totalitarianism you want, but let's talk about communists, right? Because this is a real sort of commie ideology here. What is the first thing that they do, right? You need to make sure you have control of the money. That's why Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto that centralization of credit in a central bank was a prerequisite to instituting the communist utopia. Well, we know how that turned out. It turned out in not hundreds of millions of people dying around the world due to communism, still dying today. You want to see how communism works in the real world today? Look over at North Korea and South Korea. One is communist, one isn't. Which one has fared better? Well, it's pretty easy to see because only one has the lights on at night. Okay, I'm done ranting for a second, but this grinds my gears. Anastasia, I want to go to you first because, you have actually a deep knowledge of this stuff and also just from, from personal experience as well. And I just want to ask you, I mean, you hear somebody talking about this, millionaires for free. I forget even what the name of her organization is, a patriotic millionaires. Well, we put patriotic in front of millionaires. To me, it's just like, first of all, you want to pay more taxes? Nobody's stopping you. You can just go do it. There's an IRS website, or actually I think it's a Treasury Department website. You can donate money right to our government that can't balance a balance sheet and, taxes you at the point of a gun and inflates away anything you do manage to save through fiat currency debasement. But okay, does this just smack of early stage totalitarianism to you? What's your read?
Absolutely. I mean, Walker, I'm with you. The first time I watched the video, I wanted to puke. The audacity. I mean, this is a full-blown tyranny, right? She's proposing tyranny. Turn over all your however much money you have, we must know, right? And basically what she's really saying is that money is power. So anyone they deem to have too much money or too much power, you have to give them the money so they have all the power, right? That's basically the premise here. And then she proceeds to say that this is to preserve human freedom. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, everything feels so upside down in this whole talk of hers. Like, how could she, talk about with a smile on her face? How could she use words like freedom and democracy while obviously talking about tyranny, right? Like how it makes no sense. So I am, if you can't tell, I'm literally yelling because I can't believe that people with that type of mentality and mindset have the mic that they have to spread this type of message.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this Orwellian language that she's using too. It's like, we need to take away people's freedom to use their money how they want so that we can give them more freedom, right? We just need to, and money is power, but it's okay if the government has all the money and all the power. And the government does have the power because they've got the guns. I mean, at least in the US, we have so many beautiful, beautiful firearms here. I'm so glad for it. It's probably one of the only reasons we still exist as a nation as we do today. It's also probably one of the reasons that it's very unattractive to invade the United States of America when you've got, millions of hunters all around the US that are quite good marksmen. But this to me is just, it's so absurd because it's condescending too, I guess, is the other point. That's the point that I think really irritates me is the condescension in her voice where it's like, the US is just such a mess right now. It's like, compared to what? Compared to what? Compared to the UK? Compared to the EU? Compared to Australia? Compared to communist China, which has only been able to maintain its communist hold because they've also embraced capitalism in limited forms, right? I mean, this is just, it's insane to me. So many tropes, so many just logical fallacies here. Azul, I'd like to get your take on this though, too. Okay, maybe maybe you have a contrarian view here. Maybe you don't. I don't know what the contrarian view is here, but what was your take on this? What does it make you feel, I should say, when you see this clip? Do you think this lady just wants what's best for everyone and knows what's better? Or is there something more nefarious at play?
I definitely understand where you guys are coming from. And I agree that that is a question that needs to be asked because in fact, she's not giving, she's not saying how the government will be so transparent with their money, once we give it all of ours. So I agree that, taking advantage of holding power is is not a good thing. But playing devil's advocate for a second, we're seeing right now that the UK has like super high unemployment rates, particularly in young people aged 16 to 24. The EU in general is like at 6%. I think the UK was like at 5.1 or something. And I do ask myself, like, I know that limiting people's freedoms is not the way to do this, but at the same time, I at least agree with Machiavelli that, man is selfish, and man intrinsically won't necessarily, go out and do good with accumulating wealth. And given that at least right now we can all just like procreate so easily, and there are a lot of people that need to survive and make a living for themselves, I do ask myself the question of what would be a good way for collectively as human beings. You can leave the government out of it if you want, to help each other out to a certain extent.
No, because I think that's a fair question, and I appreciate the devil's advocate view on this. What I would say is that largely when you see these problems, you see massive youth unemployment, right? You see, and I would be very interested to see in the areas where there is highest youth unemployment, how much of minimum wage laws have been instituted in those areas. The problem here, I think, is that there's generally a tendency for people to want to solve problems created by government with more government. So many of these things that we see come down to market distortions. I understand people saying, how is it possible that so few people have so much money relative to everyone else? How is that possible? How can you have people that are almost trillionaires and have other people that are, struggling to make ends meet? That's a fair question to ask. And I think it's an important one to ask. The problem is that usually the prescription for what should be done to cure this disease is simply forced redistribution at the point of a gun by the government. Who else is going to do the redistribution, right? You're not going to go knock on the billionaire's door and demand your share of their earnings. The larger problem here is that anytime government interferes, it creates a market distortion. So when you have these, I should say also backing up, the most important and detrimental place in which the government interferes is in the creation and the price setting of money, whether that be through our independent Federal Reserve, wink, wink, or through any of the other central banks around the world. The larger issue here is that we've created a distortion in the market at the highest level. We have a group of unelected banker bureaucrats setting the price of money, deciding how much money to print. When you do that, it distorts the incentives all the way down the system. It's trickle-down monetary policy that they think is somehow going to work because they know better. And this is the larger problem. You talk about, man being selfish. Let's go with that for a second. Do men become unselfish when they get in government? Or do they still retain that same selfishness? Like, the government is ultimately just made up of people. Those people don't stop being selfish beings. And selfishness in itself isn't a bad thing. I want what's best. I care about my family more than I care about my neighbor's family. If I didn't, I wouldn't be much of a father. I care about my neighborhood more than I care about a neighborhood on the other side of the world. If I didn't, I wouldn't be a very good neighbor. I care about my country more than I care about the United Kingdom because I live in the United States of America and I'm an American. So selfishness is really just about setting a cascade of preferences, right? And at the end of the day, I have to ask, the question of if the answer is always just we need to give the government more power, but that's all we've been doing. Like, that's always been the solution that they've put forward, and it hasn't worked. If it would have worked, if giving the government more power led to a utopia, communism would have worked. But it hasn't. It's failed time and time again. It continues to fail. It's resulted in the deaths of literally hundreds of millions of people since this brilliant idea was put out there. And Anastasia, I want to kick it back to you a little bit, and just because I look at this, and again, I see time and time again, especially to zoom out from this story even a little bit, you see politicians or talking heads, patriotic millionaires like this, talking about how to solve these problems, right? But they never talk about the root cause. They never talk about the money being broken. They're saying, why do these people have too much money? Well, why do they have too much money? Why? And so they never go that one step deeper. What do you think it takes for people to go that step deeper, for people to actually start looking at the root cause, to trying to treat the disease, cure the disease versus just treating the symptoms of that disease? What does it take for people to wake up to that? Or again, is this one of those cases where maybe they actually know what the disease is, but they don't want to treat it?
I wish they knew, Walker. Unfortunately, there are I guess, two ways people learn. Either you proactively study Bitcoin, right? We always, the famous tweet, we tweet, study Bitcoin. Because once you go down that rabbit hole and you learn what problem Bitcoin solves proactively, and you spend time and you read the Bitcoin standard and the big print that you so awesomely narrated, is that yes. But very few people actually do it that way. Very few people proactively pick up a book. Too many people are busy, running the rat race and trying to just outrun the inflation, outrun all the problems, and they're constantly fed. When the minute that they do have time to study and pick up a book, what are we now addicted to? The pacifiers of social media, distractions, right? So I think, it is by design. People do not question money. Unfortunately, we do not learn much about how money works and how deeply broken the system is. And I'm going to be a little bit pessimistic here, but I think the way to learn for people that had lived through hyperinflation, for example, when you explain what Bitcoin solves, the problem that it solves with inflation, they instantly get it, right? But if you have never, now people are starting to notice in the US, especially after COVID, when suddenly, remember when eggs and steak were like double the price, and it was like, what's going on? But unfortunately, they couldn't put the one and one together. Do you remember when you got a free paycheck from the government? Oh, guess what? Well, the inflation is the result of that free money that was printed to pay you to sit at home, right? But again, even after that, so very few people questioned it. So unfortunately, the way people will learn is when the system, this house of cards, just continues to collapse. And then eventually the pain will be so bad, the pain will be so unbearable that people will look into other options. Like, how can my money actually work for me? But right now, I feel like with all the quantitative easing and all the, all the things that they come up with over the years, the Band-Aid over a Band-Aid over a Band-Aid to keep the system intact, it's just enough for people not to really question and go down that rabbit hole, because it doesn't hurt just quite that much yet.
It's fair, and it is somewhat of a sad prognosis, but I luckily have a story that is a little bit less sad, and it also involves food that we're going to get into next, as a little bit of a palate cleanser, let's say. And so we'll jump into that one here, because Steak and Shake just said that 9 months after launching its burger to Bitcoin transformation, as they call it, same-store sales have risen dramatically since it began accepting Bitcoin payments. And the company reiterated that every Bitcoin transaction goes directly into its strategic Bitcoin reserves. They are accepting it as a medium of exchange and then holding it as a store of value. It is beautiful to see. Over the past year, the chain has accumulated millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin for its treasury, positioning itself as one of the first national restaurant brands to combine a cash-flowing operating business with an explicit Bitcoin reserve strategy. Management says those gains feed higher food quality and stronger demand, which in turn feeds more Bitcoin into the reserve, a self-reinforcing loop. The company also began paying hourly employees a bonus, 21 cents per hour worked. You can guess where they got the number 21, with vesting, facilitated through Fold. And that means that they're not just buying and holding Bitcoin. They're accepting it, treasury allocating it, and distributing it to workers. The message from management is simple. Combine a decentralized, cash-producing business with scarce hard money and let performance compound both sides of the balance sheet. I want to bring up Anastasia and Azul again, because I've got to say, I love Steak and Shake. I loved Steak and Shake before they made this switch. I love them even more now. They also made the switch to they use no seed oils in their restaurant. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Steak and Shake, but hey, Steak and Shake, if you feel like it, I'll eat a burger on every stream. Be happy to. Maybe a Frisco melt as well. Throw a shake in there. Who cares? I'll come film podcasts at your restaurants. I'll do it because I love what these guys are doing. No seed oils, tallow only. You can buy tallow at Steak and Shake now. We've got some right downstairs in our kitchen. And this is just an amazing thing. Since Steak and Shake implemented Bitcoin payments, I have only paid for my Steak and Shake in Bitcoin. I believe they use Speed Wallet as their provider. It's a super easy process. I've never had an issue, whether it was the drive-through or walking into the store, because I've tested both. Don't trust, verify. It works really, really well. And I'm curious, Azul, you're newer to the Bitcoin side of things. So this may not be something where you're like, I'm going to go eat there now because of their Bitcoin strategy. But just from kind of the outside looking in, as you become an insider, slowly as the process of going down the rabbit hole happens, what's your take on this in terms of just the overall kind of like brand strategy for this? Because to me, it seems like, as a Bitcoiner, I look at this and I say, this is an amazing thing. They're getting a ton of attention for this. But maybe from the outside, it's not even something that's on a lot of people's radar, or it just doesn't move the needle. What's your take?
I mean, I definitely will say that this has not been on my radar. And even as a news aggregator here at RoxomTV, I always find out about Steak and Shake stuff from the rest of you guys. However, having said that, now I do think that it is a great brand strategy for Bitcoiners. It's just going to create more loyalty and make them go to you and not to Shake Shack. And even for me and anybody on the outside looking in that comes up, against this news, it can even work as a little bit of an amusement park. I would love to go in there and just see how does Bitcoin in the real, in action look like? I have no idea. There's actually a Bitcoin ATM near where I live in Madrid. And I'm like, what goes on in there? I have no idea how this works. And it's I feel like putting more of those out there, for you guys, but hopefully for me too, whenever I do become a fully fledged Bitcoiner, is a great way to not only get attention and get people talking, but also to see Bitcoin in action and prove the point of how much better it actually is.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I remember the first time I paid for something in Bitcoin, I believe it was at a conference, and subsequently I try to pay in Bitcoin whenever I have the opportunity, and I'll buy something in Bitcoin, and then I'll just buy that Bitcoin right back on an exchange, right? Well, not on a shitcoin exchange. I'll buy it on River because they're Bitcoin only. So shout out to River for that. But this to me is just like, it makes sense, right? When we can look at this as a marketing strategy, which it certainly is. And they've gotten a ton of free publicity for this. Bitcoiners showing that they're going into Steak and Shake, buying. I've made myself several videos in this, probably a dozen different posts about Steak and Shake. I wouldn't have posted about Steak and Shake before. I wouldn't have had a reason to, even though I loved their food before, I love it even more now because I can pay in Bitcoin. I would never have had a reason to actively post about it. So it's brilliant from that perspective. But Anastasia, what I want to get your perspective on is, does this just also set aside the marketing. I mean, this just feels like a smart business decision. And I'm curious if you think we're going to start to see more restaurants, especially larger chains, kind of follow this trend. I mean, if they're paying attention, you would think they're looking at all this free marketing, all this increased, attention and saying, maybe we should do that too. What do you think? Is this going to be just the start of many more? Or is this sort of a one-off for now and the others are going to take quite a while to really catch on to what's happening?
Walker, I love Steak and Shake. I mean, this is what real world Bitcoin adoption looks like, right? Not speculation, not ETFs, none of that Wall Street fluff. It's just Main Street operator integrating Bitcoin into their day-to-day, their treasury, and their payroll, which is amazing. Last year, I think at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, I remember the COO announced kind of to the world that ever since they started accepting Bitcoin, they see that, first of all, Bitcoin payments are faster, but they're also saving 50% on fees, right? And so this kind of takes me back to, do you remember when Jack Mallers, I want to say it was 2022 Miami conference, he kind of prematurely announced to everyone that Strike was going to partner with this huge POS provider. Do you remember? I can't remember the name of the company. Was it NCR or so he basically,
I think you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, he was he had the Yo presentation. I loved it, and basically showing how the money has not innovated for the benefit of the merchants, right? The money has been innovated around the user experience. It's overall the payment processing had become better for credit card companies, but it has not been in the favor of the merchants, right? The merchants, the businesses, the small businesses, they had to eat the fees, right? The credit card fees. So I think what Steak and Shake is really showing to the world and really is blasting, and I love how much attention they're getting. Honestly, talk more about them, Walker. I'm telling you, they need to sponsor you. I would love for them to sponsor you, but I think they're really shining the light on how incredible it is to adopt Bitcoin on every level of their business, right? To accept Bitcoin, faster transaction, lower fees, to have a Bitcoin treasury that is just such an amazing way to stack, hard money in your treasury. And of course, to give back to the employees and literally give them bonuses in hard sound money, which by the way will most likely make them want to kind of look into it and educate themselves. So they're literally covering every element of Bitcoin adoption, and I am so freaking excited about what they're doing. We need more Steak and Shakes in the world. We need more businesses, copying their strategy. And you know what, Azul, if it's a marketing strategy, they're doing a fantastic job. Let them run with it.
I was actually going to ask, from a normie perspective, like, I feel like whenever I do finally buy Bitcoin, I don't want to spend it. Isn't the whole point not to use it? Like, I would feel like I was wasting it if I bought a burger with it.
So it's the classic paradox, right? When you have hard money, like as it Gresham's law, you want to spend the softer money, right? You want to spend your dollars, your pesos, whatever it might be, your euros, your Canadian moose shekels. You want to hold on to your Bitcoin. I think for a lot of us, at least for myself, anytime I spend Bitcoin, I buy it back in fiat, right? I convert some more fiat, I buy Bitcoin to replace it. But for me, spending it is a way that I use it. Like, Bitcoin is my store of value. It's also what I prefer to use as a medium of exchange anytime I can. And it's also how I denominate things. It's my unit of account. And I think that people reach those levels at different points in their Bitcoin journey. I didn't spend Bitcoin right away when I was getting into Bitcoin. I was still understanding it. I hadn't set up the wallets. Also, like, the UX around Lightning wallets has gotten so much better just in recent years. It's gotten really slick, really easy. And so I think that it's a struggle. Some people will say, never sell your Bitcoin, but that also means never spend any Bitcoin on anything. I don't agree with that approach. I think that, and again, do whatever you want for your money. That's with your money. That's the point of Bitcoin. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't care what anyone else does. But for me, I think it's really important to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, to utilize that part of the network, to utilize these other layers of Bitcoin, the Lightning Network, Liquid, Spark that is now, ramping up. Any of these things, I think it's really important because that's part of what makes Bitcoin so unique and so powerful, is the ability to spend it without middlemen. And so if I can do that, if I can support a business and I can spend some Bitcoin and I can get a great, burger and a shake along with it and tallow fries, to me, that's a win-win. Because from my perspective, it's like, I'm not losing any Bitcoin. I'm buying the Bitcoin right back. I'm just also supporting a business. I'm putting my money where my mouth is, quite literally. Steak and Shake, you can have that. You can have that tagline. I'm full of them, But putting your money where your mouth is and saying, look, I believe in Bitcoin. I'm going to use it not just as a store of value, but I'm going to spend it and reward businesses who I think are doing the right thing with it. So I'm happy to spend my Bitcoin on it, but I see that perspective from you. Absolutely. I think it's how most people feel, especially when they're just, dipping their toes in. We're not going to hold it against you if you're not out there at Steak and Shake, the next time you have the opportunity. But I don't know, Anna, if you're kind of in the same boat as I am on this.
Absolutely. Walker, I am a spend and replace kind of girl. I love paying with Bitcoin anytime I have the opportunity. I have a policy, any people in my life that I genuinely care for and love and respect. Like if there's any business or a transaction involved, I will convince and orange pill them, we'll first make sure that they understand that I want to pay them in Bitcoin better money because I genuinely care for them. So for the last few years, for example, all my beauty stuff, my hair lady, my nail lady, like I tip them exclusively in Bitcoin. They're fully orange pilled. They now have set up a DCA and buying also on River. River is getting a lot of shout outs. We should also get sponsored by them, I think.
If you're listening,
Yeah.
Alex.
Yes. And so, yes. So Azul, it's one of those things where once you go down the rabbit hole deep enough and understand how important it is to obviously have your hands on Bitcoin, but also to make sure that people in your life understand that there is a better money out there, and then they should also strive to get their hands on it. I think that's like the next step, right? For you, of course, let's get you off zero. Let's get you start DCAing, and then let's talk in a couple of months, and you will find yourself wanting to, pay or tip for your coffee if they do accept Bitcoin, with Bitcoin, because it's also an amazing experience. Like no matter how many times I've already paid with Bitcoin, Walker, I'm sure you can agree. It's always like this element of magic. Like the minute money, the minute you pay with Bitcoin, you're just like, it makes me so freaking happy. It's the best feeling in the world.
It really is. And it's just, it's really amazing too, because you have an opportunity, again, if you want to do what you want with your money, but you have an opportunity to really show your support for businesses, whether that's a business like Steak and Shake, whether that's an artist. Like I've bought some cool open dime necklaces that Madex, the artist, created. He's a badass, Albertan artist up there in Canada, the Communist Republic of Canada. But he's fighting the good fight up there. But anytime I can do that, I've bought Bitcoin books in it. I've bought a heck of a lot of beers and drinks with Bitcoin anytime I get a chance. And so it's really fun though. You're right, Anastasia. It's like, you get to actually use magic internet money in this really fun way. Like, yeah, holding Bitcoin, watching number go up, that's very fun too, right? However, there's something so special about spending it, again, putting your money where your mouth is and really using Bitcoin as peer-to-peer cash. And despite what all of the shitcoiners and all of the Bitcoin haters would say, yeah, Bitcoin works really well as peer-to-peer cash. The Lightning Network, Liquid, Spark, there's multiple other layer 2s that work so well for fast, instant payments. And you really just have to see it to believe it. Anytime I see somebody, saying that kind of stuff about Bitcoin, it's too slow, it's dinosaur tech, it's like, well, you're spouting old talking points. Like it's just false. But love what Steak and Shake is doing. We're coming up on time here. Last thing I would say is if you're in the US, I think Steak and Shake has a restaurant now in El Salvador. I don't know if they have them in other countries, but I'm craving Steak and Shake now. So I may have to go get some after this stream is over. I will be paying in Bitcoin. But Anastasia, Azul, I really appreciate you both joining here. Do you both want to just give your handles so people can go find you here? Anastasia, let's start out with you.
Yeah, Walker, thanks so much for having us. Yeah, on X, Nasty Huddle. Although I also, spend and replace. Yes, so.
For me, you can find me at Azul at RTV for RoxomTV, of course.
There we go. And yeah, great to have two fellow Roxom team members on here. We'll have to do this again. I liked the dynamic here, ladies. It was a good blend of pre-coiner, Bitcoiner, and conspiracy theorist there. I'll let you guys decide which one is which. Thank you both so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining me on here today. We'll have to do it again soon. Folks, thank you for joining. We are not done yet. You've got me for another hour. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back here on Roxom TV with more. Stay tuned.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, His Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed two brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I'm with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is $67,500 and some odd dollars, or infinitely printed Federal Reserve notes, as we like to call them on here. We're going to dive right into our next story. I'm with you here for another hour today, and we've got a lot more to cover. Starting out with a cascade of resignations and career disruptions, which is spreading across corporate America and global business circles, following the release of more than 3 million pages of internal documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell. While none of the figures below face criminal charges yet, the disclosures have prompted boards, clients, and stakeholders to force or accept departures by executives whose past interactions with Epstein were revealed in the files. The most prominent recent fallout came from Hyatt Hotels, where Thomas Pritzker, executive chairman since 2004, announced his resignation after newly unsealed U.S. Department of Justice documents detailed a long history of communications with Epstein and Maxwell, spanning more than a decade. Pritzker publicly acknowledged poor judgment in maintaining those ties and said he wanted to protect Hyatt's reputation. Across Wall Street, Catherine Ruemmler, general counsel and chief legal officer of Goldman Sachs, also announced she will step down effective June 30th, 2026, after correspondence with Epstein was made public. The messages revealed a closer relationship than previously acknowledged, including exchanges long after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Goldman's CEO publicly praised her legal career even as the resignation unfolded. In the legal sector, Brad S. Karp, longtime chairman of elite law firm Paul Wise and Rickfin, Wharton and Garrison LLP, wow, those law firms sure have fun names, stepped down from that leadership role after emails showed he thanked Epstein for social invitations and discussed socially connected matters. The firm immediately elevated Scott Barshay as the new chair amid internal pressure to stabilize leadership. Hollywood and talent representation have been shaken as well. Casey Wasserman, renowned talent agent and CEO of Wasserman Media Group, whose clients include major music and sports talent, said he is putting his agency up for sale after archived emails with Maxwell, predating her convictions, drew public backlash and key clients severing ties. Wasserman also plays a significant role in organizing the Los Angeles 2028 Olympic Games, a position now under intense scrutiny. The pattern extends beyond individuals directly linked to major firms. Business Insider and other lists compiled from the document release show additional resignations and departures, including public figures who who were affiliated with organizations, boards, or advisory roles after interacting with Epstein, as institutions distance themselves from reputational risk. Though some executives retain roles in part, such as Karp's continued partnership at his firm despite stepping down as chair, the cumulative effect has been a broad weakening of the elite business networks once considered untouchable. The files have also triggered formal scrutiny of other figures, like Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who has faced bipartisan calls for resignation after his name appeared in linked documents, though he has so far remained in office. Now, as for why viewers at home should care, these ripple effects show how accountability, or at least reputational cost, can outlast legal outcomes. When powerful executives and institutions react to documented personal ties with someone like Epstein, it signals a broader shift in how boards, clients, and stakeholders weigh ethical risk, governance, and brand integrity. For average consumers and employees, this can translate into changes in corporate leadership, strategy, and even market confidence. The business environment, from hospitality and finance to entertainment and law, is facing a stress test in transparency, and the precedents set now will affect expectations for executive conduct across industries. Now, I think this is just the first wave of what I hope will be an absolute tsunami of this. I also hope that beyond just resignations and, saying, oh, well, I shouldn't have been doing that. Boy, oh boy, didn't know that Jeffrey Epstein guy was such a bad egg, which you did, let's be honest. I hope that there is actually some real legal action taken against people who are known to have conducted either, utilized his child sex trafficking networks or were otherwise culpable in these cases. Obviously, I don't want anybody who is innocent to face any jail or prison time or punitive offenses for something they didn't do. But if, I imagine, as the FBI probably has, actual evidence supporting illegal actions taken, disgusting, immoral, and illegal actions taken against children, I would hope that the FBI would make that stuff public. You've heard from multiple high-level officials before in the government that releasing all of the Epstein files, unredacted, could destabilize the government, could destabilize the global power structures. And that's sort of the point. We need to completely reassess the people who are in charge of our country, who are in charge of major corporations. Now, for private corporations, they can do whatever they want, right? They can deal with the reputational damage that is done by having somebody closely associated with Jeffrey Epstein stay in power at their organization, or they can have them resign, step down, whatever. But I would hope that criminal charges would follow for people who are in fact guilty of wrongdoing. And I suspect there are quite a lot, because as of now, the only two people who seem to have actually been arrested and put in jail, well, one of them was Jeffrey Epstein, who apparently then killed himself under very strange circumstances. And the other one is Ghislaine Maxwell, who's living it up at a cushy, low-security prison, even though she was sex trafficking minors with Jeffrey Epstein. But apparently, we treat our child sex traffickers a heck of a lot better than we treat open source developers whose only crime is writing open source software, like the Samurai Wallet developers, the Tornado Cash developer. And this is the ultimate hypocrisy that I see here, is that you have all of this stuff come to light. You have this evidence that people at the highest levels of government, of business, are all complicit. Not all of them being complicit, excuse me, let me check my language. That many of them who are named in this are complicit, knew what they were doing, did probably very heinous, and just beyond being illegal, things that should make anyone's stomach turn and make you kind of want to fire up a lynch mob and go take care of that the old-fashioned way. Because it appears that as of now, nothing is actually moving forward in terms of bringing legal action against these people. What is it going to take? I don't know. But I think it takes Americans continuing to demand some actual accountability here. Because at this point, all we've seen is a couple people having to step down from their public role and then still remain on boards. We're not even seeing any politicians step down yet. We've seen a couple internationally, right? But it's been pretty minor at the end of the day, especially when you consider the gravity and the absolute depravity of the things that these people have been, not charged with yet, because nobody's really been charged, but the things that these people are potentially complicit in. Again, we're going to continue covering this extensively on RoxomTV. This is not going to go away as much as some people who have been implicated may want it to. And I encourage you to keep making noise about this, because if we continue to let an elite cult of satanic pedophiles run our world and pay taxes to them, even unrealized gains tax to them, then boy, we've got another thing coming. We're going to move on here to the next story around some insider trading in prediction market betting, because Israeli authorities say an Israel Defense Forces member and a civilian used classified military information to place wagers on Polymarket. Shocker. You may remember we talked about this a few weeks ago here on my show on RoxomTV. We talked about it with Hank as well on the show that I co-host with him on Thursdays and Fridays. We've covered this, the fact that, wow, it just kind of makes sense. There were Polymarket accounts tied to this person, this member of the IDF, and it was very clear they were operating on classified information. This was clear a while ago. I'm glad that they've now found them out conveniently. According to police, they accessed classified operational intelligence in the course of military service and shared it with a civilian who then wagered on Polymarket contracts tied to potential military operations, including bets tied to when or whether Israel would launch strikes on Iran. And what a shocker, they were correct about when that would happen. The two suspects remain in custody as the case proceeds. And this controversy highlights structural vulnerabilities in prediction markets themselves. Platforms like Polymarket allow anonymous and crypto-based betting on thousands of real-world events, including elections, economic outcomes, and geopolitical actions. While proponents see these markets as liquidity engines that aggregate dispersed probability estimates, the case shows that they can be exploited with insider knowledge, creating both legal and ethical dilemmas for regulators and tech platforms alike. I think one of the big lessons here should be that maybe you shouldn't be gambling on these prediction markets because you're gambling against people with material non-public information, often classified, as in this case, and they are going to win. Instead, maybe you should just stay humble, stack sats, try to create value, and, continue to accumulate Bitcoin. But I realize that as we are in late stage fiat vibes, everybody wants to become a gambler. Everybody wants to strike it quick. Everybody wants that get rich quick moment because, saving wealth slowly with Bitcoin is apparently just too boring for most people. But it's not too boring for me. I happen to kind of like it. I also not like betting against the house when it comes to trying to bet against people who have, again, this material non-public information that they are utilizing for their own enrichment. If you think this case in Israel with the IDF forces member is an isolated one, boy, you've got another thing coming, because this is definitely happening across many governments. It's definitely happening in America. This is very obvious that it's going to continue happening, and probably to larger degrees. We will continue to see these sorts of prediction markets gamed by insiders who have this material non-public or often classified information. And, again, this should just be a reminder to folks that this is, you may call it a prediction market. This is just gambling. And that's okay. Gambling is fine. Do whatever you want with your own money. As I say time and time again, I do not care what you do with your money, but you should be aware of the risks, and you should be aware of the fact that you are going to be betting against people who probably have more information than you do. Yet another opportunity for insiders to dump on retail, much like all of these shitcoins that are currently being replaced on all of these shitcoin casino exchanges by these very prediction markets. Okay, we're going to dive into the next story here. And this one we covered a little bit earlier on the show, but I do want to cover it again because it is just a really great story. So Lawrence Lepard recently roasted a Bloomberg analyst. This went pretty viral. Bitcoin advocate Lawrence Lepard, and author of The Big Print, is grilling this Bloomberg analyst, Mike McGlone, for saying that Bitcoin is, in Mike McGlone's words, quote, an asset that has unlimited supply. Let's go ahead and take a look at the clip.
If you weren't in it the best 20 days from 2018 to 2025, you missed 600% gains. I mean, so, my view is you buy it, you hold it, you dollar cost average.
So
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
You're dollar cost averaging in an asset that has unlimited supply. That's done. It's over. It's reached.
Trump bump. Unlimited supply. What the fuck are you talking about?
They're going to go there. Okay, let's create some controversy here. The crypto bubble. Okay, so maybe you should let me speak before you interrupt, because you're described a classic bear market. You're denying it. You're trying to buy every dip. You'll sell out. You'll stop out when And I'll say it now, it reaches a pretty low plateau around 10,000. That's usually how markets work. But please understand what happened in 2024. That was as good as it gets. Mr. Trump flipping. Now, if you're investing in the space, not only are you you're supporting the Trump administration, you're dependent on the Trump administration. You have stable coins that have taken over the peer-to-peer cash. If the trade is done, and you still have millions of cryptos worth billions of dollars, let's flush those out. Let's get Shiba Inu down to zero, Dogecoin down to zero, and then restart. In the meantime, if you're long any of these highly volatile risk assets completely dependent on beta, you have to have the stock market go up. It's flunk 2 tests. It's failing versus beta. It's failed versus gold. The whole space is done. Just get out. Wait till you see a lot of stuff goes to zero, and then get back in. But the biggest trade in history, the bubble is bursting. I will make the prediction from the future. We will look back at the crypto mania very comparable to tulips. It's just getting started. Like I said, now, if you're buying Bitcoin now, you better hope that 180-day volatility in the stock market stays an 8-year low. You better hope that market cap to GDP stays at a 100-year high. Just acknowledge the trade and trade. Sell rallies and risk assets.
I hope somebody's got a video of this, because we're going to shove this up your ass in a year or two.
Attaboy, Larry. Now, there's just so much wrong here with what Mike said, because clearly he just has no understanding of Bitcoin at all. Either that, or he does understand it and he's just purposefully lying. Could really go either way. But for those who may look to Bloomberg or other legacy media publications and still think that they're the people out there telling the truth, I want to clarify a couple of things for you about Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not, in fact, have unlimited supply. It has a fixed supply of 21 million coins. That's it. That is all there will ever be. It is enforced at the protocol level. Additionally, conflating Bitcoin with the thousands of vaporware shit coins, maybe tens of thousands now, is either just, again, lazy analysis, willful ignorance, or just outright lying, if you do in fact know better. And other guests in this interview agreed on Scott Melker's show that most of the, quote, crypto world is going to zero, but Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin was the first. It is the only one that actually matters. The rest of these have been distractions and operations that have fleeced retail investors for way too long. But Bitcoin is digital scarcity. Crypto, quote, crypto is fiat on steroids. Instead of just the central bank having the money printer, everybody's got the money printer. There are insiders, and they are there to fleece you under the guise of providing you with something that is the next Bitcoin. Or now they don't even try to, come up with the fact that it's the next Bitcoin. They just tell you it's just a meme coin. It's just a get rich quick scheme. At least they're starting to be honest about it. But again, this whole crypto scam is really just starting to fail. And you see this in the acknowledgement from exchanges like Gemini, like Coinbase, like Robinhood, where they are now pivoting away from crypto and pivoting toward prediction markets. But with Bitcoin, this is a 0 to 1 moment. Either Bitcoin goes to zero or it becomes the global store of value. That is the choice that you are making. Which one do you think is more likely to happen? Clearly, Mike McGlone thinks it's going to go to zero, and then you just should buy back. Again, I can't tell if this guy is just being, lying on purpose about this, is just feigning ignorance, or if he just really is ignorant. It's so hard to tell with folks in the legacy media. But this is ultimately a good opportunity for Bitcoiners to stand up and say what needs to be said, that we need to be more toxic. We need more of Larry's energy when these bullshit narratives show up on, on these major platforms from major journalists or whatever he is, analysts. This is a guy from Bloomberg. He should know better. And the bad framing spreads fast. It's been spreading fast about Bitcoin. Lies have been circulating about Bitcoin since its inception. And they've continued, despite all of the evidence to the contrary. The lies continue to propagate because the mainstream media, the legacy media, because they're not the mainstream anymore. The legacy media talking heads continue to spew this nonsense. We can't just let things slide like you can say Bitcoin has unlimited supply. It was good for Larry to challenge this. Otherwise, the misinformation just calcifies and you have more and more people repeating these idiotic talking points. So I think we need more people like Larry Lepard willing to call this out in real time and just absolutely destroy these bullshit narratives before they metastasize further. So shout out to Larry. I'm glad that he called this out. Again, I'm struggling to understand whether this Mike McGlone character is just, as ignorant and foolish as his words make him seem, or if he is purposefully just trying to spread misinformation, purposefully trying to cast fear, uncertainty, and doubt upon Bitcoin. And, Mike, put your money where your mouth is. Go ahead and short the thing, right? You can do that. You can do that in a variety of ways. Why don't you just go out there and short it? Show us your trade. You think it's going to $10,000 or going to zero? Well, you're going to make a heck of a lot of money, bud. If you're the brilliant analyst that you say you are, why don't you go ahead and just put your money where your mouth is, go out there and short it. I know Larry's got his money where his mouth is. He's a massive Bitcoin bull. Again, he wrote the book, The Big Print, talking about the fiat debasement that he's witnessed in his long career investing and why he thinks Bitcoin is the answer to that for people. This Mike McGlone guy, I don't know. He's on the payroll of Bloomberg. I don't know who else's payroll he might be on to be saying things that are so obviously false and idiotic. But, let's not attribute to malice what can just be attributed to good old-fashioned stupidity. And let's see. This is just insane, though, that you still have somebody working for a major financial news outlet who is spouting such easily disprovable false things in the year 2026. Mike should know better. And if he doesn't, well, then he's just a bad journalist, right? He's a bad analyst if he truly doesn't know better, if he's covering this stuff and just talking out of his ass like this. So good on Larry. Don't worry, Larry. We've got the receipts. I want to make that clip my ringtone because it just absolutely gets me fired up. And I'm glad to see Larry not being afraid to, throw the political correctness to the side and say, listen, this is bullshit. You're lying right now. You're not telling the truth. We need more of that. We need to be calling this out, whether it's from altcoin shills who are trying to sell you their new shitcoin du jour, whether it's from legacy media talking heads who should know better but somehow still inexplicably don't after so many years, whether it's from politicians like Elizabeth Warren who continue to lie about Bitcoin from the bully pulpit. Bitcoiners need to call this stuff out. We need to remain toxic. That doesn't mean being mean to people for no reason or hurting their feelings or something like that. But it means that when we hear stupid things spouted, no matter where they come from, we call them out and we call them out aggressively because we cannot let these lies stand. A lie cannot live unless you let it. So we need to let the truth win out on this. We need to keep speaking the truth. We need more people like Larry who are not afraid to challenge people, no matter where they might be coming from, what position they might be coming from, who they represent. Good on Larry for calling this out. Shout out to you, Larry. We need more of this energy, not less. So I don't know about you guys, but I stand with Larry on this one. We're going to go ahead and take a very quick commercial break. And when we come back, we've got news on the Dutch House passing a new unrealized capital gains tax, a totalitarian global asset registry, and a couple more stories to round out this stream here on this Tuesday on RoxomTV. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We will be right back.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed two brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I am here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 67,596 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. We're going to jump right into our next story, where we head over to the Netherlands, where they are currently moving ahead with their overhaul of the Box 3 tax system, advancing legislation that would tax actual returns, including unrealized gains, at roughly 36%. That means investors could owe taxes on increases in the value of stocks, funds, real estate investments, and of course, Bitcoin, even if they never sell, they never realize the gain. The rollout is targeted for 2028 pending final approval. The core concern here is liquidity. Taxing unrealized gains means individuals may owe taxes on paper profits without receiving any actual cash flow from a sale because it didn't occur. That forces selling simply to cover the bill. In rising markets, this creates synchronized policy-driven sell pressure, but in volatile or thin markets, the pressure can compound and prices may go down further, creating a negative feedback loop. But Balaji Srinivasan argued that the danger is broader than just Dutch investors. In his words, wealth taxes can trigger, quote, forced liquidation pressure, meaning it's not only risky to hold assets as a Dutch citizen, it may become risky to co-own assets heavily held by those subject to the tax. A large portion of a cap table is concentrated in a jurisdiction imposing mark-to-market taxation. Simultaneous selling to meet tax obligations can drag down the asset price for everyone. In extreme cases, he suggests prices could fall so far that liquidation proceeds don't even cover the tax owed, creating systemic stress. Now, I want to read a particular tweet that I thought was pretty illustrative of what we're actually talking about here. So this is from XFreeze. So he says, "Be me, Dutch investor. Netherlands approved 36% unrealized gains tax. What the fuck does that even mean? Puts 1,000 into stocks. Year 1, stocks go to $2,000. Government, you made $1,000. Pay $360 cash tax. My feeling when I didn't sell anything. Forced to sell shares to pay. Everyone else forced to sell too. Mass panic selling. Stock crashes to $800. I have $440 left after paying tax. Year 2, stocks recover to $1,200. Government, you made $400. Pay $144. Or selling again. Price drops to $900. I have $756 left. Year 3, stock at $1,000. Government, you made $100, pay $36. Smart money has fled the Netherlands. I have $964 in stock. My feeling when I paid $540 in taxes. My feeling when stock is back where it started, 0% gain. My feeling when I only have $460 left. I lost 54% on a stock that broke even. The government made more money off my investment than I did. Government, thanks for the $540. And this is very real, right? This isn't just, some funny little tweet. This is a very real thing that is going to happen. This is going to happen. Also, the other thing that's going to happen is capital will leave the Netherlands. This happened in Norway when they instituted an unrealized capital gains tax. It will happen everywhere that politicians, purportedly well-meaning or perhaps just stupid, try to implement these unrealized capital gains taxes. It's just not smart. It doesn't take a very bright person like you. You don't have to have a very high IQ. I think you could probably figure this out with an above 100 IQ, that this creates a bad incentive. This creates an incentive for people to leave the country, for your capital to flee the country. That's capital flight. You may have heard the term. It's going to happen at mass scales because nobody wants to stay in a country where they're going to tax you on something you haven't even realized yet. I mean, this is just so patently absurd. I cannot believe that this got pushed through. I mean, but who knows? Maybe if their country gets a little bit more, bankrupted through all of this, then perhaps, Greenland might be more on the table. But ultimately, I think this speaks to a broader trend of, in this year, 2026, in the digital age, people have the ability to vote with their feet more than ever. People are more mobile than they've ever been. So if you don't like the policies of a particular country, you can leave a lot easier. You might even be able to still do whatever job you were doing before, because if you have some sort of, internet-based job, you can do it from anywhere. And this just, again, creates a terrible precedent, a terrible incentive. It really just, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever unless your goal is to decrease your tax base. The purported goal that they say is to increase the tax base, right? They think they're going to collect more taxes from this, but that's not going to happen. I don't know exactly what their exit tax laws are in the Netherlands. Maybe they have some like we do here in the US, like most countries do, because, hey, are you really free if you can't even leave your country without paying a huge chunk of your net worth to the government to go spend on foreign wars you never agreed to? Well, that smacks of freedom to me. But again, the point here is that this is just bad policy. It's illogical. It does not make any sense whatsoever. The purpose of a system is what it does. And implementing this sort of unrealized capital gains tax system will simply make capital flee your country to go to jurisdictions where their capital is welcome, where it won't be taxed into oblivion, especially where the unrealized gains that your capital has accumulated won't be taxed. Again, it just doesn't make any sense. But apparently it made sense to the Netherlands because this appears to have been pushed forward. So let's see what happens. But I really think these wealth taxes, wherever they come about, these unrealized capital gains taxes, you have to be extremely mid-curve to think that this is a good idea. You have to really just not be able to think about second or third order effects whatsoever to think this is somehow a bright idea or will somehow increase your tax revenue, right? And if you have a problem with some people having more money than others, okay, whatever. But why don't you actually address the root of the problem, which is that we have a broken monetary system that benefits the people closest to the creation of new money more than it benefits everyone else. This is the Cantillon effect, popularized by Irish-French economist Richard Cantillon. It means that those closest to the proximity of the creation of new money receive the greatest benefit from it. The rest of it trickles down. Inflation spreads throughout the economy from the top to the bottom, from the people who receive the new money first to the people who receive the new money last. This is not trickle-down economics, it's trickle-down monetary policy, and it is the reason that we see such wide disparities in wealth today. It's not because the rich are greedy and if we just tax the rich, if we just give the government more power, if we just give the government the ability to steal more from its citizens, then that'll fix everything, right? Well, no, because if giving the government more power to take more from its citizens worked, it would have worked. We would have seen wealth inequality decrease. But despite taxes rising all over the world, we've seen wealth inequality increase. How is that possible if that's not how it works? If taxation actually redistributes wealth as it's supposed to? Well, it's because it doesn't. Again, these systems are broken, and all of these sorts of attempts to equalize things, make them more equitable, make them more fair, while perhaps good intentioned by some people who didn't take more than 5 minutes to think this through, otherwise they would have realized it was a dumb idea. But perhaps let's assume they're well-intentioned. They just purely don't work. They don't work in the real world. They may sound nice in your fantasy land, but they fail miserably when you put them up against the reality of the market. And unless you're willing, the only way that this works is if you are willing to physically prevent people from leaving your country. Unless you create a literal prison state where people are unable to leave. If you force people to stay, you force them to keep paying taxes, then this might just work. So all you have to do is just make your entire population a prison colony and you'll be good to go. But I don't think people want that, right? I don't think they want that at all. But some people apparently do. Some people want to continue increasing the amount of money that is stolen from citizens under the threat of violence. And if you don't believe me that it's under the threat of violence, I'll explain it to you in a moment. But some people apparently want to see the government have more power, for the government to take more money, and that'll apparently just fix everything, right? And that really brings us to our next story, which is the idea of a global asset registry. Sounds stupid? Well, you have no idea just how stupid it is. A viral clip of Erica C. Payne speaking at a World Bank Group and International Monetary Fund event is exploding online, and for many watching, it is not just controversial, it is chilling and, quite frankly, infuriating to see this kind of language. Payne, the founder of Patriotic Millionaires and author of Tax the Rich, with an exclamation point at the end, has long argued that concentrated wealth threatens democracy. Well, if she said democracy, then it must be true. But in this clip, she goes much further. Let's take a look.
We actually have a beautiful opportunity in front of us with the United States being such an unmitigated disaster as it currently is. Okay, so there is the opportunity, and within that opportunity, I would suggest three things. The first one, we have to have a global asset registry. We have to know who has the freaking money. And if they don't want you to know that they have the money or how much money they have, chances are they got it from somewhere they shouldn't have gotten it from, and they're spending it on something they shouldn't be spending it from. So number one, a global asset registry. Number two, we have to facilitate an international conversation about what is enough. And that if there is a number that is enough, there is a number that is too much. We believe that money becomes power, and when power threatens your democracy, you have to take away power, and the only way to take away that power is by taking away the money. And the only way to take away the money is taxation. So number three, forget progressivity. All right? Forget progressivity, unless by progressivity you mean taxation that makes people less rich. This is not about a 2% wealth tax when somebody's getting a higher return than that. This is about taxation in order to preserve human freedom.
Taxation to preserve human freedom. Yes, that's exactly what I think of when I think of human freedom. I think of forced confiscation of your assets by a bunch of men with guns who represent the government. And if you don't agree to them taking away a certain percentage of your hard-earned money, well, you go to jail, right? And if you don't agree with them taking you to jail, they kill you. That is the chain of events. That's what happens if you stop paying your taxes. That is where this ultimately leads. And that is why I say that these taxes are extracted under the threat of violence. Now, let's be clear about what she's proposing here. She's proposing a centralized global system that tracks who owns what across borders, combined with taxation that is explicitly designed to make people less rich. This is not some modest reform. This is a coordinated global financial surveillance panopticon, a totalitarian's wet dream paired with engineered wealth reduction and redistribution. And I was just looking a little bit into this woman. It appears she's been a Democratic operative, has run some 501c3s and think tanks. So now it makes sense why she has, she's a patriotic millionaire, because apparently she's probably been suckling at the teat of the taxpayer dollar for a long time. And, if she's been running 501c3s that don't pay any taxes, I find it a little bit ironic, but that's beside the point. The larger point is that it's not any of the government's business what assets you own. And to use the old trope that, well, if you have too much money, and define too much again, right? She doesn't give any definition. What is too much money? Where's the line, right? Do we adjust that line of what's too much money for inflation every year as they devalue our hard-earned money even more, as they steal from us through the silent tax of inflation? Where's the line? Where do you draw it? Doesn't matter. She doesn't actually have any idea. It's just about saying things that sound good to uneducated people's ears, or to people's ears that just want more power. She talks about this power, that money is power, and that's right. And the more money that is taken from individuals and given to the government, the more powerful, the more bloated, the more kleptocratic, they become. Because to control people, you need to first start by controlling the money. And again, there's just so many tropes in here. We have to do it to save democracy. We have to do it to preserve human freedom. We have to do it because if you have too much money, it must be because they're from some ill-gotten gains. You must have been doing something illegal to get that money, right? Now, this is just insane, right? I mean, does she have too much money? Did she do things that were illegal to get that money? Maybe somebody should look into that. But ultimately, this sort of forced confiscation and wealth redistribution, this is just communism. That's all she's describing is communism. She's describing taking from some and giving to others. The old communist saying, from each according to his needs, or excuse me, according to his ability, to each according to his needs. But we know how communism works out. Communism has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of millions of people since it was foolishly implemented in many countries across the world. Communism leaves a trail of bodies, blood, and destroyed societies, wrecked economies in its wake. If you don't believe me, look at the difference between North Korea and South Korea. A prime example, North Korea is communist, and then when you look at the satellite map of North Korea at night, there are no lights on, except probably in Pyongyang, where, of course, the supreme leader is able to still keep his lights on because he's doing such a great job running that country. But again, this sort of language from these types of people, if they're so concerned with redistributing wealth, why don't they redistribute more of their own? If they're so concerned with some people having so much money and other people's not having enough, why don't they fix the underlying problem, which is that our money is broken? If they're so concerned with people getting their money through ill-gotten gains, why isn't she up there talking about how absolutely every bank involved with Jeffrey Epstein, who made money literally from child sex trafficking because they were laundering Jeffrey Epstein's money for him, why isn't she talking about holding those people accountable instead of just slapping them on the wrist with a fine as a cost of doing business that they factor into their budgets anyway? And that's the thing. That's where you can tell that these people are ultimately full of shit, because they don't actually speak up about anything that matters. They don't actually speak up about changing the rot that is at the center, at the core of our system. They just talk in these empty platitudes that sound good. They talk in these condescending tones. You can hear it, and you can hear the chuckles around the room with everybody at the IMF and the World Bank, who, by the way, if we're talking about destructive, powerful organizations that are destructive because of their monetary influence, the IMF and the World Bank have created an insane amount of destruction around the world. There's a great Bruce Cockburn song. He's a Canadian singer-songwriter, and it's called "Call It Democracy." And there's a lot of good lines in there, but I'll just say one. It's, IMF takes away everything it can get, always making certain that there's one thing left, leave them on the hook with insupportable debt. Again, the irony of having this woman, Erica C. Payne, speaking at a World Bank Group, an International Monetary Fund event, and saying that we need more forced wealth redistribution, while the IMF and the World Bank are literally raping and pillaging developing nations around the world to keep them in debt forever, to keep their populations subservient, to give massive loans to dictators that then steal that instead of actually using it for their people, to get them hooked on this bullshit climate and green initiatives instead of letting the developing world use oil like every other currently developed nation did to get to where it is today. To be speaking from that stage and to say these sorts of things, to talk about redistributing wealth like this, forced redistribution, is just insane to me. I mean, look in a mirror, for God's sakes. It's just absolutely absurd. And at the end of the day, this is, to bring it home here, rant concluded, this is why Bitcoin is so important. And if you can get non-KYC Bitcoin, I highly recommend doing so, because there are all sorts of people like this around the world who are suffering from a case of the totalitarian temptation. They don't want you to have power. That's explicitly what she's saying, right? She's saying that too much money and you could be powerful. But they're okay with the government having more power, with the government taking your money, with the government becoming as powerful, as big as can possibly be. They're perfectly fine with that because it means that they're still in charge. And they know better, right? I mean, after all, she's speaking from this place of authority. She's talking about in such kind terms. I mean, just tax the rich, ! As is the title of her book. Just tax the rich, and they have too much already, and just give it to the poor people of the world so that we can all be equal. But the problem is here that all of these sorts of initiatives just tax the rich. Well, what is the rich? Initially, income tax in the US just started with the top, 1% or very small amount of people. Now we all pay income tax. Well, actually, not all of us. About 50% of Americans don't pay any income tax at all. And those are the people on the bottom 50% that I'm talking about. Now, the people at the top percent, you may say, well, they don't pay enough income tax. Yeah, maybe our tax code shouldn't be so absolutely corrupt and crooked and built for people to evade it as long as they have enough high-powered lawyers to be able to satisfy the demands of the IRS. And ultimately, the people who end up writing these super complicated tax codes are usually lawyers themselves, and many of them end up in business afterwards, showing you just how you can circumvent those tax codes that they helped write because they know all the loopholes. They put them in there themselves. I'll maybe leave you with a couple other points on this, is that we should resist this kind of thinking. And much like Larry Lepard called out that Bloomberg analyst earlier for saying things that were just completely stupid and destructive, we should call out this kind of behavior. We should call out these sorts of people who are making these statements. I think to make statements that are basically calling for communism, that are calling for forced redistribution of wealth at the point of a gun, at the tip of a spear, to make those kind of statements, that should be tantamount to calling for Nazism to make a comeback. Communism killed an order of magnitude more people than Nazism, right? Now, this isn't me endorsing Nazism. That's bad. So is communism. Communism is just much worse because it's killed hundreds of millions of people versus under 10 million, right? So we should be very, very critical of people who are speaking like this because the system that they are advocating for is one that results in hundreds of millions of people dead. That's what they're advocating for when they advocate for centralized control, when they advocate for forced redistribution of wealth, when they advocate for global asset registries, when they advocate for checking every possible little thing that you could possibly have, anything that you could own, they want to know about it. It's not their right to. We need to remember that we have every right to know everything the government is doing. It's our money that funds them, whether that be through taxation or whether that be through money that's freshly printed out of thin air, which also devalues our money that we've managed to save. So we have every right to know everything the government is doing. We should have them under a microscope. The government has no right. They have no right to know what we are doing. You, if you're listening to this, I assume you are a law-abiding citizen. You are doing your best to do right by your family. You are doing your best to provide the best life that you can for yourself, for your loved ones. That's what I'm doing over here, right? And these people who think that you are not entitled to the fruits of your labor, that as soon as you get to whatever arbitrary amount of money they set, that you are now a danger, that you must have gotten that money, not through your blood, sweat, and tears. Oh no, it must be through some illegal actions. We need to KYC more. We need to do more anti-money laundering protections. And of course, if KYC and AML policies worked, then we wouldn't have money laundering. But we do, and it's mostly done through the big banks, the JP Morgan Chases, the HSBCs, the Deutsche Banks. The list goes on and on. The same people that laundered money for a convicted sex trafficker and child predator, Jeffrey Epstein, those same people are helping to write the laws that put open source Bitcoin developers in federal prison while they continue to walk free. Nobody gets arrested at the big banks. They've got too much money. They've got too big of a lobby. They've got too much legal insulation from ever being held accountable for wrongdoing. And again, you'll notice that these people, like this Erica C. Payne from the Patriotic Millionaires Group, and again, author of Tax the Rich. I'm sure it's a fascinating book that will be sure to lower your IQ by a few points. But why aren't they calling for reform of the banking system? Why aren't they calling for the end of the Federal Reserve? Why aren't they calling for anything that would actually move the needle for average people? They're not. They're just calling for more forced redistribution of wealth at whatever level makes sense for them, at whatever level makes them feel warm and fuzzy inside and sounds good to people who haven't thought very hard about this and about the second and third order consequences of it. Okay, I think that rant is concluded for now. Last thing I'll end on very quickly here is just on a little bit of data from River, because I think this is we need a little Bitcoin palate cleanser after that nonsense. So River, the Bitcoin only exchange, recently reported a massive change in Bitcoin ownership in 2025. So according to their latest report, individuals still hold the majority of supply at 14.01 million Bitcoin, about 66.7%. But that share has declined significantly over the last year, and individuals reduced holdings by roughly 696,000 Bitcoin in 2025 alone. And on the other side of that trade were institutions. Businesses added 489K Bitcoin, 489,000. Wow. Funds and ETFs, 205,000. Governments, 135,000. And at the same time, 1.61 million Bitcoin, about 7.7%, is estimated lost forever. 168,000 Bitcoin, or 4.6%, is attributed to the Satoshi mining area, and only 1.04 million, or 4.9%, remains to be mined. The available float keeps shrinking. So this 2025, it wasn't retail driven, it was balance sheet driven. Bitcoin moved off of individuals and onto corporate treasuries, ETFs, and sovereign balance sheets. So what I'll leave you with is this, guys. While apparently individuals are selling, institutions, funds, and governments are buying. I, for one, am not going to be selling them any of my Bitcoin, but I sure will be spending some of that Bitcoin at businesses that accept it, such as Steak and Shake, which we covered earlier. So, do whatever you want with your money. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not Erica C. Payne trying to tell you how to live your life and what to do with your money. I'm not the government trying to tax you into oblivion and force you to redistribute your wealth to them, and then they can just give it to the right people, of course, meaning mostly to their friends. Nope, I'm just a guy who's trying to stay humble, stack sats, and have more Bitcoin today than I did the day before. When I spend Bitcoin, I replace it, and I love spending my Bitcoin at Bitcoin businesses. Now I'm starting to get a little hungry. It's been a great 3-hour stream here with you guys here on RoxomTV. Again, I am here every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on RoxomTV. We're going to do our best to keep bringing you the best Bitcoin news and world news in the best way we know how. You can also find me on Thursday and Friday on Hank's show here on Roxom. I'm there as well. So Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, if you tune into Roxom, you can find me here again. Bunch of other great programming almost every hour of the day here on RoxomTV. So do check us out. Make sure to follow RoxomTV wherever you are watching right now. You can find me, Walker America, wherever you're looking for me. You can find me on Nostr at primal.net/Walker. And I'll just leave it at that for the day. It's been a pleasure being with you here as we do every Tuesday. Stay awake, stay alert, and remember, do not succumb to the totalitarian temptation. I will see you next week right here on RoxomTV. Until then, take care.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one